I just want to start by saying welcome to today's session. Those we were with yesterday and new people today. It is wonderful that we can meet here together and be able to continue with our deliberations around the amazing Africa Charter. So as we are moving on now, today our focus is on the implications of the Africa Charter's aspirations for the further shaping of Africa-Europe research and innovation policy and funding. So we are going to have to start with some welcoming remarks. And now I'll call upon Professor Shosi Kesi, Dean, Faculty of Humanities, University of Cape Town, South Africa. And when she's done, she will be followed by Professor Omoyo Bosire Onyancha, Head of Research and Graduate Studies, College of Human Sciences, also from South Africa, University of South Africa. Professor Shosi. Okay, let me try this. Good morning, colleagues. It's been a real pleasure to be part of this conversation with all of you yesterday and today. And on behalf of the, can I close this? Can I close this for 2 minutes? Thank you. There we go. So on behalf of the University of Cape Town, I would like to reiterate that we are very proud to be a core and facilitating partner for this important global initiative. The principles of the Charter reflect UCT's Strategic Vision 2030 and the core ideals espoused in it, as well as our commitment to social justice. Decolonization is a core aspect of the UCT Faculty of Humanities research strategy, and as the faculty from which the new push to resuscitate the old question of how to disrupt and balance the unequal knowledge system emerged, it is encouraging to see that political critique has been successfully translated into an analytical framework for transformative global engagement with Africa across all disciplines. We are committed to supporting the secretariat work of the Africa Charter and the work plan that has been laid out. As we move towards reviewing the milestones covered in the SDGs and the Africa Agenda 2063, the Africa Charter provides an important framework for rethinking global collective action towards realizing these goals. Colleagues, the project of internal reflection on our own collaborations, partnerships, and cooperation relationships is one of the projects that we intend to roll out in order to begin the work that we need to start doing to understand the fundamental imbalances that underpin the global knowledge ecosystem. As I have learned, we are in the process of starting off important research on research collaborations that will provide further empirical evidence on the nature of these partnerships and specific directions on what needs to be done in order to achieve the aspirations laid out in the Charter. One of the highlights of yesterday's conversations for me was the idea of working towards an Africa Charter Horizons project with the aim of designing a model of best practice for transformative research collaborations between Europe and Africa. And I look forward to seeing this project take shape. We also heard many other valuable practical ideas on how to implement the principles and aspirations of the Charter, and it has been very encouraging to witness the engagement and commitment in the room. There was also a sense from the conversations yesterday of the policy and regulatory environment as an important barrier in the geopolitical landscape. The question of language also emerged as a critical area for reflection. And last week, or I think it was last week, I had the honor of hosting our annual AC Jordan Day at UCT. And AC Jordan was the first Black South African to graduate with a PhD from the University of Cape Town. And so we honor him every year with this annual lecture. And his field was sociolinguistics. And to mark this event, we launched Professor Traba's translation of Frantz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth into isiZulu. And I think more than the translation of a text, it is the translation of scientific language and concepts that is important. We have also undertaken at UCT the introduction of Kiswahili as our Pan-Africanist commitment to connect our students and staff to the most widely spoken language on the African continent, so that we are not merely paying lip service to being an African university. As you can see, colleagues, this work is already happening, and we invite you to collaborate with us in these necessary transformative changes through the work of the Africa Charter. The post-colonial moment at the University of Cape Town has seen us change many things, but we are still at infancy in some of these key changes. But I think together we can be bolder and accelerate this process. Excuse me. UCT is also profoundly shaped by one of the most important student movements globally, the Rhodes Must Fall movement. Next year marks the 10th anniversary of Rhodes Must Fall, and we need to honor this hallmark in a myriad of ways, recognizing our gains and acknowledging what still needs to be achieved in the profound set of questions that Rhodes Must Fall posed, not only to us as an institution, but to academia broadly and to the project of decolonization universally. We must hasten to caution that a decolonial turn is a turn, but not the destination. We have not yet arrived, but turning towards the right path is a fundamental step. The decolonial turn also means disciplined improvisation while maintaining the highest standard of academic rigor and intellectual integrity. The Africa Charter fits squarely into our aspirations as an institution, and with your support, we believe that we can make an impact. It is through transformative collaborations that we can show the world that Africa, the birthplace of humanity, will also be the place for its rebirth for the future. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I could have said that Jose has said everything that was to be said. But allow me just to say a few things, and that is, I come from one of the largest universities in Africa, the University of South Africa, which is an open and distance e-learning institution with over 340,000 students and spread across over 80 countries around the world. Sorry. So this event reflects our way of reaching out to as many partners across the world as possible, and also it is aligned with one of our objectives at the university, strategic objectives of promoting African scholarship through international collaborations and also even regional collaborations. And we've got students, like I've said, from over 80,000 countries around the world, and these have also become like ambassadors to connect UNISA to all countries. I think to as many as countries around the world. So, as we embark on today's discussions, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you and all the esteemed colleagues and distinguished guests. In particular, I would like to acknowledge our keynote speakers and panelists who have come from across continents to share their insights and experiences. The importance of this meeting cannot be overemphasized. The aspirations embodied in the Africa Charter for transformative research collaborations inspire renewed vision for shaping Africa-Europe research and innovation policy and funding. They call upon us to envision partnerships that are equitable, inclusive, and driven by mutual respect and shared benefits. This gathering serves as an essential step towards translating those aspirations into actionable frameworks and policies that bridge resource and power asymmetries and foster sustainable, impactful research ecosystems. Today, we will hear perspectives from leading figures in academia, policy, and international cooperation. Their voices will guide our reflection on how to create and enhance strategies that align with the principles of the Africa Charter and leverage them to reshape research and innovation landscapes. The discussions will highlight the challenges we face, but more importantly, they will illuminate the pathways towards strengthening our collaboration and impact. I encourage each one of you to engage actively, exchange ideas, and forge connections that will transcend this event. Let us together commit to a future where transformative partnerships propel not just knowledge creation, but also societal progress. Thank you for being here today, and I look forward to fruitful conversations ahead. Thank you again.
A big thank you to Professors Kesi and Onyancha on setting the tone of today's deliberations by reminding us of our common belief in the critical need for a transformative approach to our core collaborations. We will now proceed to hear some keynote addresses, beginning with Professor Judith Squares, Deputy Vice-Chancellor, University of Bristol, UK. Vice-Chancellor.
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be speaking to you again today. I had the honour of opening the event yesterday morning and briefly speaking to you and hearing all of the richness of the discussion yesterday, and I hope that today is equally rich and that we move on to think specifically about how we take the richness of that conversation forward. Because, colleagues, we have a significant opportunity before us. As we meet here today, Europe and Africa are in the process of envisaging a wider, renewed research and innovation-focused partnership, centred, among other things, on joint efforts in higher education and science intended to contribute to recasting the fortunes of both continents. Academic collaborative inquiry between scholars and institutions in these two continents will be central to the forging of such renewed partnership. And the ways in which such collaborations are configured will, in many senses, be foundational for shaping its character and its spirit. As we heard through our discussions yesterday, higher education and research institutions across Europe and Africa are envisaging a wider, renewed research and innovation-focused approach to partnerships. And the development of this new approach to partnerships has the potential to drive a recasting of the fortunes of both continents. For academic collaborative inquiry between scholars and institutions in two continents can be central to the forging of a renewed partnership between Europe and Africa more widely. The ways in which such collaborations are configured will, in many senses, be foundational for shaping the character of the interactions between our continent and its spirit. And as we considered yesterday, the vision for a deeper transformation of Europe-Africa research collaborations encapsulates the Africa Charter. The transformation envisaged addresses not only asymmetries in concrete project arrangements, but also the underlying power imbalances in knowledge production. The Charter asks us to question the power imbalances that arise through wide disparities in institutional infrastructures and capacities, and through the dominant use of Eurocentric epistemologies, languages, concepts and theories, and indeed the development frame itself with its unidirectional gaze. Signatories of the Africa Charter can collaborate to define new ways of conceiving and doing Africa-Europe research. And I would urge you to consider asking your institution to become a signatory if you haven't already. We heard yesterday the broad resonance and endorsement that the Africa Charter's call for transformation has found across European and African scholarly constituencies, with over 100 signatories to date, and indeed a new one just yesterday. This resonance reflects a recognition that the change the Charter seeks in greater fairness in collaborations in order to create equitable partnerships has come. But the Charter does more. It raises foundational questions about what equitable partnerships are for and what equity needs to entail. As Isabella Abodaran made clear yesterday, this needs to go beyond equitable arrangements to be explicitly Africa-led and centred. It's conceptually grounded in post-colonial thinking, challenging us to think about the global science and research ecosystem as a whole. An ecosystem where, as Isabella pointed out, less than 1% of researchers globally are African. Only one African university is in the top 200 in our key rankings, and only 12 highly cited scholars are affiliated to an African institution. We need to recognise, therefore, that there is an uneven playing field in the production of research and science, and imbalance that is a product of dominance of European epistemologies, theories and concepts. Even the development frame itself poses a challenge for that approach. So the Africa Charter calls for transformation in Africa research and partnerships in order to redress untenable legacies of colonialism. But the balancing of Africa global north positionings aims to achieve more. This is an ambitious charter. It's about enriching the worldwide academic effort as a whole, making it more potent, more able to find solutions to the multiple existential crises facing our planet and humanity today, enriching our collective global scholarship, addressing the global crises that are in many ways a product of the dominant frameworks of the global north. Yesterday's engaged discussions highlighted that positive approaches and methodologies for translating some of the principles in the Charter into practice may already exist across disciplinary fields. Equally important, the discussions pointed to concrete avenues and systemic processes of reflection and review that we can pursue collectively to identify the positive approaches as well as to pinpoint major gaps where new ways of working need to be actively forged. It is, I think, only a matter of time before we will have collectively established models for transformative collaborations, which redress not only asymmetries of concrete project arrangements, but also the underlying power imbalances that arise through the disparities in institutional infrastructures and capacities, and through the dominant Eurocentric frameworks. But such transformative partnership working can only be established as a benchmark and as a standard practice within the scientific community if the policies and guidelines of our universities, but also our funders, publishers, academic governance bodies, and ultimately governments, properly enable and explicitly incentivise it. In other words, the HE science sector policy and regulatory architectures in both continents, and crucially, the Africa-European research and innovation policy and funding initiatives encompassed in the EU innovation agenda and the EU framework programmes will set the rules of the game that will determine how research collaborations can and will unfold in the future. So we need to take seriously, therefore, the Charter's aspirations and call for advocacy and advancing structural adjustments in these policies and regulatory architectures. At the University of Bristol, we are taking this seriously, understanding that envisaging change that is fundly aligned with our global civic mission will require us to forge reparative futures and really to understand what that change will involve, recognising that it will not be quick and it will not be easy. It will require a willingness to invest in work for a long term, and a deliberate, careful and concerted effort. We have the Charter's conceptual framework and a growing number of signatories, but how, as Professor Kessie asked us yesterday and today, do we move forward? A steering group has been established and, together with the Charter's primary institutions, has undertaken to develop a programme of Pathfinder projects. These focus on better understanding what is required in practice to realise the principles of the Charter. And these processes of review aim to identify which policies and guidelines have a direct or indeed indirect bearing on the kinds of collaborative work that's being promoted. And this will require a detailed review of existing policy architectures in our universities and funding agencies against the Charter framework. This work will require us all to pinpoint where and how existing policies and guidelines already speak to the principles of the Charter, and in many ways they do, but also where major gaps remain, where adjustments are required, and what existing positive models can be used to build upon these. Together with partners at the Universities of Leeds, Coventry and the Institute of Defence Studies in the UK, we at Bristol are developing plans to embark on such a gap analysis, focusing on our own policy and regulatory architectures and those in a number of key funding agencies, publishers, as well as the UK's Research Excellence Framework. We imagine that the approaches developed might serve as useful starting points for considering the pursuit of a similar review of European and Europe-Africa policy and funding frameworks in light of Africa Charter principles. Such a forward-looking analysis could be invaluable in informing the steps to further develop and craft the foundations for an Africa-Europe partnership in HE and science. A partnership that drives innovation, but does so founded on a paradigm shift, a genuine rebalancing of research relations between the continents. A partnership, in other words, that truly becomes what it is envisaged to be, one amongst equals. So we look forward to today's discussions with our European and African partners and to continuing them with you after this event. The University of Bristol is proud to co-host this forum here in Brussels, together with the University of Bergen and the wider Coimbra group of universities, of which we are both members. And I'd like to thank you in joining us in this debate and thank all of those colleagues from the different organisations who've been involved in planning it. Together, we can really establish not only shared understandings, but also avenues for moving towards collective, concerted action in pursuit of a truly renewed, rebalanced Africa-Europe partnership in higher education and research. Let's make discussions today count. Let's realise the potential of the Africa Charter, an initiative whose time has come. Thank you very much.
I now call upon Professor John Gyapong, Secretary General, African Research Universities Alliance, to come and give his keynote address. Professor Gyapong.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everybody. And I'm pleased to be here as well to share my thoughts on this very important subject, even as we attempt to align the policies and the incentives for the transformative North-South research collaborations. What are the imperatives? Over the last decade or so, there's been a marked and steady shift from the idea of development aid to discussions on partnerships and collaborations. And key discussions has called for equitable partnerships, which is something that we all tend to ascribe to. In the higher education sector, particularly in Africa, it really remains unchanged. The status quo remains with all the inherent challenges from the colonial era. Academic governance bodies in the Global South remain focused on teaching and learning because of the massive numbers that we need to teach, with very little work being done on research. So the Global North is also attempting to engage and make some form of concessions on how to engage with those of us from the Global South. So there is some movement and some ground shifting. But the average African researcher has many challenges that has been alluded to since yesterday, and over the decades we know these things very much. But the whole concept of the principles of equitable partnerships in research collaboration is still lacking. With the poor development of research management systems in our environment as well, our engagement with partnerships for research and collaboration has not been mainstreamed, and there is very little available in terms of toolkits and reference material for us to engage with appropriately. And of course, the current funding mechanism is largely modeled on the development aid system. So there are still challenges that we need to engage. And the questions that we continue to ask ourselves are, what does it mean to have an equitable partnership? We all seem to have the idea that we must have an equitable partnership, but what is it? And are these partnerships symbiotic enough? Are they mutually respecting of each other? Is there equity? And are the profits or the benefits of these partnerships equally shared? Is there reciprocity in all these engagements? And does the researcher in the Global South have the opportunity to do as much mobility as our colleagues from the North? And these are all issues about equitable partnerships that we would want to engage. So these bring into focus the current pandemic issues, which is even making us having to reflect on these partnerships the more, because it is becoming increasingly clear that we live in a global village, and that the issues that are apparently affecting one group in the North affects us also in the South, and vice versa. And therefore, there is a need for us to look at all these transnational and transdisciplinary issues which affect both of us. We do not live in islands, and we need to notice that and see how best we can address these challenges. So the broader issues, as far as we're concerned, is that there is little recognition for the vital role that institutions that are in the Global South play in all these research collaborations, and we need to address them. And the whole concept of a homogeneous southern sector or Global South is something that we need to disabuse our minds of. So I ask, what challenges have characterized research partnerships in the recent decade? Because of some of the challenges that I raised, there is all this issue about brain drain. Some of our brightest youths have moved into the Global North, and because of the imbalance, have not returned back into our environment to facilitate the development that we all desire. I always tell my story when people talk about brain drain. My story, I know, is that when I went to medical school, there were 40 of us in the class. There are only 3 of us in Ghana. So that is my concept of brain drain. Call it any name, brain circulation or whatever, but I know that 37 of my colleagues are out of Ghana. And there is inadequate assimilation of the knowledge in research partnerships. And our institutions continue to depend on external funding. And therefore, until we begin within our sector also to fund research appropriately, we may not achieve the goals that we want so much to achieve. So we are calling for a paradigm shift. And the shift requires that both the North and the South take cognizance of these challenges and address them to the best of our ability in the spirit of concession and also co-creation and co-application of all the concepts that we talk about. This new business model which we look at must be a complete rethinking of and reorganization of the approaches towards research partnerships in the global South. And that our research centers must be jointly worked out together, and so that we can work together with our colleagues from the global North, and everything that we do must be co-owned, and the objectives must be co-authored. Research centers need to be embedded within the institutions within the global South. Very often you have extensions of some of the institutions of the global North setting camp next door to us, and I find it very intriguing. I mean, there are quite a number of universities from the global North who have set camp in Accra, in Ghana. So you get, I don't want to mention names here, but University X has a campus in Accra. I mean, what's the point? Well, I think these are real issues that we need to confront. And the integration of the local research capacity building must also be addressed to deal with this whole issue of brain drain that I talked about. These partnerships has been such that we must look at the global South context, where there is a lot of teaching that needs to go on. And therefore, we need to also incorporate the teaching as part of the research gains and the research outputs. So how do we ensure that our teaching is grounded in the research that we do, development of joint courses, and co-teaching and co-supervising students, and then also moving away from this short-term helicopter research, you fly in, collect data, move out, and look at long-term collaborations that will develop the environment within which we work. And therefore, the whole concept of clusters of research excellence comes in, and it is something that we need to consider very seriously. So for us, a sustainable partnership must address the support systems around which research is built, and must support the institutionalization of the local environment with seed money with matching funds from all the partners. And for me, very importantly, the fact that we need to make a deliberate effort to place universities in the global South and their potential contribution at the center of all these discussions. It is very important and very critical that we do that. What will it take to do this? I mean, these are our aspirations, but how do we get there? I think there must be sufficient political will to ensure that these goals and aspirations are achieved, from the university leadership to the bigger bodies at the national level and at the continental level. So for me, I think it is very good that we are here in Brussels to discuss this so that we can have buy-in from the major stakeholders at the supranational level. There must be a deliberate effort also from research institutions in the global North to make significant contribution to the knowledge base needed to address the local challenges of the global South, and address issues that which I keep saying are the bread and butter issues of the people that we work with. The SDGs gives us a pathway into this. And when we address issues that are so important on renewable energy, looking at pandemics, social and political polarizations, which are easily transnational, the things that easily affect us, then there is buy-in from all the major stakeholders. So we also need to have advocacy at the regional bodies level, like the AU and the EU, to commit to long-term strategic partnerships aimed at investing in the knowledge systems of the Global South. This, for me, is very critical. And the need for some ring fencing of some resources from these bodies to the Global North, and also push the agenda of the Global South also investing in research, the commitment of at least a certain proportion of our GDP to fund and support research. This is very critical. And for that reason, the Africa Charter has been launched, and there are many signatories to it. It's a good idea. All the principles and aspirations are great, and we need to be working at it. But signing the Charter, for me, is not enough. It is good to sign. We've signed so many treaties. I know my country is very quick to sign all these international treaties, but beyond the signing of the treaties, what do we do? So there is a system in place to have some gravitas to ensure that the key actors on the ground in Africa are able to push this agenda forward. And I think we need to put in place mechanisms to ensure that this is done. The role of AAU is very critical, and I'm happy to see that my sister from AAU is facilitating this session. Those of us from Arua and Codestra and all the research institutions within the African continent must be available to push and put our shoulders to the wheel to ensure that this agenda is successful. But beyond that, I think there must be focused implementation. We need to demonstrate feasibility. And by that, I mean we need to look for some model funding of some projects to demonstrate success. Because when you're able to demonstrate success, then there is buy-in from other stakeholders. And there could be a dedicated stream of funding from the usual development partners like UKRI, GIZ, NORAD, CEDA, and all the rest. And of course, the AU Innovation Agenda platform could also make some resources available for this activity in order that we will be able to demonstrate success. What have we done from the Arua perspective so far, which we think is worthy of emulation? We look at equitable partnership from the perspective of co-creation, equity and mutual benefit, respect for diverse knowledge, capacity building and ownership, and all the good things that we talk about in the equitable partnerships. And we have signed the charter, and all the 23 universities within our Arua network have been encouraged to engage actively, not just sign, but engage actively. We've also developed some mechanisms that we think would help us address some of these challenges that the first speaker spoke about the Eurocentric epistemologies and all those challenges. We have developed what we call the Centers of Excellence initiative, where we look at issues that are very germane and relevant to us, and try and address them through collaborative research amongst us as universities within the African setting. So we go with what we call the hub and spoke model. The institution that has the best capacity, probably, let's say, in food systems and sustainable food systems, would engage with other universities within the Arua network. And through that, we develop collaborative research, look for funding, and address these challenges for the benefit of the continent. We've translated that to our partnership with the Guild of the European Universities. And through that, we've developed the Africa-Europe Clusters of Research Excellence, which is the core, which seek to address the societal and scientific challenges common to Africa and Europe, which creates an opportunity for African and European scientists and researchers to gain coordinated access to each other's facilities, and also to ensure that the resulting co-creation of the new knowledge and the relevant development takes place within our environment, facilitating mobility, but addressing the concept of brain drain. There are many of these chapters, issues that we've been addressing, looking at the issue of sustainable development goals, scientific excellence, equity, all the issues that we ascribe to the AU innovation agenda. So this, for us, is also very, very relevant, and we think that we need to look at that and see what we can learn from there. So again, here we have two hubs with different spokes. One hub in the Guild and one hub in the ARUA network, with other universities within the networks forming the hubs around which, forming the spokes around which this hub operates. And through that, we mimic the hub and spoke model so that we can develop, co-create, and co-implement research to the benefit of all. My concluding remarks, I think a good understanding of the systemic power imbalances is very, very important. Because if we don't understand those challenges, then addressing them becomes problematic. Equitable partnerships that involve African partners cannot be devoid of enhancing significant research capacity within Africa. This, in my opinion, is very, very important, and Africa deserves special attention because of the systematic imbalances that have existed all this while. And there should be equitable partnership, must be long-term based. It is not a short haul, it is a long haul. We must engage one another and understand each other very well. And the guiding principles should acknowledge the diversity of knowledge and skills, committing to transparency, respecting relationships, redressing evidence of hierarchies, and then we must be based on shared values and goals. I hope if we're able to do this, we will be able to achieve some of these goals, as we have attempted to do from the Guild and the ARUA perspective. We think we are making progress, and there is still a lot of work to be done, and we'll definitely get there. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Deputy Vice-Chancellor and Secretary General, for representing the voice of academic leadership in supporting the mobilization of our universities across our two continents, in embracing the principles of the Charter as we seek to begin to operationalize it. And we can now proceed with confidence, knowing that the key policy leaders are supporting us. And we'll now go on to invite three speakers who are going to talk to us on issues around policy. I will ask you to just talk for just the key aspects of policy. Just give you 5 minutes each, and then so that we allow some interaction with the audience, so they can ask questions, and then you can flesh out the issues as we proceed. So if I can get some help to just have 3 chairs here, because I want them to be nearer because of our time, and then so that we can direct our questions accordingly. I will now call upon Mr. Jean-Michel Serres, Policy Officer, Youth, Education and Research Culture, DG for International Partnerships, to come forward And you're going to be the first one. And then Ms. Dora Chifra, if you can take a seat. And then Mr. Jens Hogel, please come and take a seat as we now hear from Mr. Jean-Michel Serres.
This one?
Thank you.
Okay, I understand. I'm only given 5 minutes, so I will be very short. I want to say first that I'm very happy to speak after Professor John Guaipong, because you said a lot of things I was planning to say, so we very much aligned together. A short introduction, I work for the Directorate General for International Partnerships at the European Commission. And this Directorate General, maybe you are not so familiar with this service of the Commission, but we are the ones in charge of implementing the EU policy for sustainable development, and we are part of the external actions of the European Union. It's a big service with a lot of colleagues in country partners, and that's an important point considering what I will say afterwards. How can I move the...
There's a remote.
Okay, sorry.
Just use this arrow. This one.
This
No,
one?
This one. Yeah. Yeah.
Next. No, it's not working. Oh, okay. A few words. Development cooperation is a long story in the European Commission. It's part of the EU treaties. It's also part of the new European Consensus for Development that frames the EU and member states' actions towards achieving the Agenda 2030. And it's part also of our new strategy framework that I will develop a bit more later, Global Gateway, our new investment strategy with partner countries. But research cooperation is also a systematic deliverables of the summits we have with our partner countries and continents, starting with Africa and more recently the Caribbean and Latin American regions. Research and innovation cooperation is part of the development policy, but also part of the research and innovation policy of the European Union, of course, through the global approach that defines the principles and priorities for the research and innovation cooperation at international level. It's also a deliverable of the ministerial meetings we have with key research and innovation ministers of partner countries. And finally, it's part of some strategic frameworks we decide with you on the way we should collaborate, and first of all, the research and innovation agenda with Africa. Next. We have an instrument called NDC Global Europe. You are perhaps more familiar with Horizon Europe, but Global Europe is the main instrument for implementing development cooperation. It's a program of 80 billion euros, mostly dedicated to cooperation at national and geographical level. Most of the funding goes to the countries and the regions in developing countries, and we keep some allocation for thematic interventions where the interventions at country or regional level is not the most appropriate. This is how the budget is divided between the different lines. As you see, 2/3 of the budget goes to countries and regions, and mostly to Africa, because Africa is the #1 priority regions for our actions. research and innovation cooperation is part of our programming. And we are making interventions as much aligned as possible with what our colleagues in DG RTD are doing. You know that Horizon Europe allows, for most part, collaborative research projects through competitive calls for proposals, and in synergy with that, we are concentrating our efforts into building the capacity of our colleagues in developing countries in order to be able to participate in such competitive programs such as Horizon Europe. So most of our funding for research and innovation cooperation goes to research capacities, but we also intervene at research collaborative levels and funding to policy making in order to help our country partners to produce, elaborate a conducive environment for policy-driven actions. So I don't have time, of course, to list the many actions we finance. In addition to that, you should know that in our directorate, we don't proceed through competitive calls for proposals. Most of our actions are top-down, decided with the partners we consider the best to implement actions. So that's why for many of you, it's quite not that easy to understand how to participate in our programs, because most of the time we decide on the way to proceed on a more top-down approach through different mechanisms that I have no time to develop. But you have here some key programs we support. Some are standalone research and innovation actions, and most of them are thematic because, of course, STI is a cross-cutting issue in many thematic interventions, and we are trying to push as much as possible research and innovation components into the thematic actions we implement. I want to say a few words about one of the actions you can see here on the slide, which is the ARISE program. I don't know if you have heard about it, but it's a program very similar to what the European Research Council does in the EU. We support top-class researchers in Africa to conduct research in different fields of scientific collaborations. And I'm pleased actually to announce that we will continue this program in the next phase of our programming. But I want to say, and I would like to insist very much on this global gateway strategy, which is a bit the new paradigm in our development cooperation policy. And that follows very much the EU-Africa Summit we held in 2022, where we decided that instead of going again into this classic donor-recipient approach for development cooperation, we should switch and go more into an investment strategy with our partner countries based on common priorities, based on common interest. So the challenge today is to have a strong research and innovation components in the investments we decide to go for in countries in our region of our partner countries. So the investments we prioritize are the investment in a few thematic sectors that you can see on the slides. And we have also research and education as a strong component of this global gateway strategy, because the philosophy of the investment global gateway package is to say we do not want only to invest in the infrastructures you need, but we want also to bring to that the education, the skills, and the research you need for our investment to have a longer impact and involve also the research community as a success factor of the investment we decide to engage with you. So, to give you an example, we are trying to have, in every investment decision we make at country or regional level, a research and innovation component for the investment to be long-term, to include both the hardware investment, but also the software investment, the conducive environment that would make the investment successful. I take the example of this action we have with South Africa to support the country in the green transition efforts towards a more sustainable economy. And by bringing together the efforts by the EU in terms of investment, and also the efforts of the member states involved in cooperation with South Africa to have a research and education component. In that case, this research and education component is mostly implemented through a couple of member states, including France and Germany. And that's an example of the type of investments we want to engage now and involve research and innovation at the same time. So my point to you is to say we have Horizon Europe, and this program will probably continue to support collaborative research, but we have also this new investment strategy in the scope of our development cooperation policy. It's very much oriented towards sustainable investment, and we want these investments to be composed not only of the hardware investment, but also the soft side of it, including education, skills, research and innovation, wherever it's possible to go. How to engage into Global Gateway, because Global Gateway is likely to start from startup. We are at the startup stage of Global Gateway. We're going to scale up Global Gateway in the future. We will multiply our investment in our country partners. So what I invite you to do is to look at the first 200 flagship Global Gateway investment we have already engaged, most of them in Africa. Look at the possible opportunities, linkages of few activities with this investment, and in the future have more research and education part of this investment strategy. I thank you very much. Sorry, I was very
important information.
Thank you very much.
Can I just ask a question before we go on? The slides, will they be shared? Can we have access to the slides? Do you agree to share them? Yes. Yes. My question was more.
In principle, you are next.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I think we all prepared for 10 minutes each, so it will be really challenging now so it's really just to run through the slides. I will speak about two EU programs, Erasmus Plus and the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, starting with Erasmus Plus. I think you probably all know that Erasmus Plus is not specifically a research financing tool. However, there are several actions under this program that could contribute the cooperation between Africa and Europe in the field of research. The first action is the international credit mobility. And the core idea here is that two institutions exchange their staff and students. These students can be bachelor or master or even PhD candidates, which could be a very good asset to complement the Marie Skłodowska-Curie action. We will speak about this later. The second action is the Erasmus Mundus Joint Masters. These are integrated masters that are offered by a consortium of universities, and the participating students will have the chance to study in at least 2 different countries. The third action is the capacity building project for higher education. These projects are based on multilateral partnerships of European and Horizon Europe organizations on the one hand, and other institutions from different partner regions. Yes, and finally, under Erasmus Plus, we also have the Jean Monnet activities that support academic teaching and research, also cooperation projects, conferences and publications, all in the field of EU studies. And African institutions can apply directly on their own, so you don't have to be in a consortium. And we really would like to encourage African organizations to participate in this action, because what we see now that this tool is very much underused by African partners, while there could be a huge potential. Indeed, we can share the slides with you, so you can click directly on the links, and it will help you to find more information on these Erasmus Plus opportunities. And now let's move to the Marie Sklodowska-Curie actions. The MSCA funds excellent research, including doctoral programs, postdoctoral fellowships, and collaborative projects. And we are under Horizon Europe. We are under the first pillar of Horizon Europe, that is to fund excellent science. And we have a budget of 6.6 billion euros for the current 7-year programming period. When speaking about the main features of this program, MSCA is to support researchers' training. It also involves a mobility element that could be either international, intersectoral, or even interdisciplinary. We also want to establish attractive working conditions for researchers, and we are working on to establish very strong ties with industry, especially with small and medium-sized enterprises. We have 5 main actions under MSCA. So these are doctoral networks, postdoctoral fellowships, staff exchanges, co-fund, and MSCA and citizens. So the first 4 could be relevant in the case of African countries. So who can participate in this program? So when it comes to organization, this means that any legal entity, including from organizations from the business side, can be part of this program, while individuals participating can be of any nationalities. Of course, it can be that some other type of specific conditions will apply. When speaking about participating countries, we have 3 types of countries. Of course, we have the EU member states, the Horizon Europe associated countries, and the third countries. So what we can say is that MSCA is really largely open to the whole world. So institutions and researchers from all over the world can participate, and the organizations that are part of the program from third countries can either host or send researchers abroad and cooperate on different kind of research projects in basically all scientific scientific domains, since it is a bottom-up program, so we really cover all the scientific fields and topics. A bit more concretely about the participation of African countries, what we experience now that the participation remains pretty low compared to the potential of Africa, but still since 2014 the MSCA has supported more than 2,300 African researchers and 200 different African organizations. When we want to understand the main reasons behind these low participations, what we can say is that there is still a lack of information on MSCA opportunities, but the good news is that we have different kind of tools to support you, to support potential applicants, and I would like to really invite you to check. We have a long list of useful links, and I think it will help you if you can directly click on to search for the relevant information. As I said, there is a huge potential in Africa, to cooperate with Africa, to work on this project together. So I really would like to encourage you to have a look at the additional information and encourage potential partners to join our program. Thanks.
Because we're going to eat a little bit into your tea break time, if you don't mind, so that we can, I think as you can see, the information they're providing is very useful.
I hope so.
Yeah, we might not have time to ask questions, but I think their presentations are quite comprehensive, and there is information, plus they are here to interact with them throughout the program. Thank you very much.
This one? Yeah. Page down, okay. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm supposed to speak very briefly. I'll try to do my best. So, just to wrap up and put it a little bit in context, we had Jean-Michel talking about sustainable economic development, support from the European Commission, or from the European Union, I should say. With regard to Africa, we had Dora talking about higher education support, MSCA, and so on. And now the third element is the hard labor, the research. And that is the support is being provided by DG RTD, which is the research branch of the European Commission. And for Africa, we have, since a long time already, the high-level policy dialogue on science, technology, and innovation since about 2003. As an informal forum that was established, as I said, 2003, a long time ago. But still, the dialogue continued up to 2010, when it was formalized and became really the official arm or branch of our dialogue on research and innovation with our African partners. And it has developed since then a bit further. We have now 4 partnerships. We have, we call the most important one probably the Global Health EDCTP3 partnership, which is really on research cooperation in the area of public health. You probably have heard about it. It combines, I think, 42 African countries, members of this partnership, and I think 19 EU member states, and also the European, with additional funding from the European Commission, from the Research Framework Program. We have the Food and Nutrition and Sustainable Agriculture Partnership, which is also long-standing. I think 2016 there was a roadmap adopted by the high-level policy dialogue, and there are also now, how can I say, ideas how to broaden and have a better and stronger foundation of this partnership, which will be hopefully realized very soon. We have the Climate Change and Sustainable Energy Partnership, which is also working since 2017, actually. They all work according to the same principles. They have the roadmap, they have experts from the two continents, and they meet regularly to discuss various issues. And then the latest baby on the block, and we have Vincenzo here as one of the co-chairs of the Innovation Working Group, which has met regularly over the past 24 months, I believe, more or less. And they organize also workshops. The next workshop, by the way, is coming up in, when, Vincenzo? 3rd of December? 3rd of December. It will be a workshop on public health, and will be organized, it will take place in, was it Pretoria? Pretoria, South Africa. So you will, or you have probably already seen the information, and we will be very happy to see you all in that workshop, and also in other workshops, of course. Of course, we have our policy base. I don't want to expand on that. The high-level policy dialogue, as I said, it has been established. It has 4 priority areas, and they relate to the partnerships in principle. We have public health, partnership. We have the partnership, 2 partnerships under the point on green transition. As I said, the FNSSA and the CCSE. We have the partnership on, or the pillar on innovation and technology, where we have the innovation working group established. And we have a pillar on capacities for science. And for example, Dora spoke about human capital development in a broader sense. This is featuring here under this pillar. We have other pillars like other subject areas like open science, gender equality, which already speak to some extent to the Africa Charter. Certainly not entirely, but to some extent. The public health partnership, I explained that already here, is the EDCTP and the green transition, the 2 partnerships, the FNSSA and the CCSE. So, just a brief glimpse on Horizon Europe, the structure of Horizon Europe. When we talk about Horizon Europe, we mainly speak about Pillar 2, the global challenges and European industrial competitiveness. We have different clusters here. And then we have the Marie Curie actions under the first pillar. So this is where Dora comes in. And Jean-Michel is the one that is a little bit outside of this program. Horizon Europe is a 95 billion euro program. NDICI, we have heard, is 80 billion, if I understood well. So we try to be complementary, of course. But this complementarity is definitely enhanced through the innovation agenda and the work we do since 2023 officially, but started already a bit earlier. We also work together to draft the innovation agenda with our colleagues of DG INPA and DG EAC. So it is kind of a joint framework that was built, and we hope we can continue working together also with you on this framework and to shape the future of our joint collaborations. Now, as part of Horizon Europe, we also have certain funding opportunities or specific funding opportunities for collaboration with African partners. We call them the Africa Initiatives 1 and 2. I don't want to go into the details. You will receive the slides. But they are part of our general call for proposals as part of our work programs under Horizon Europe. And we try to really focus on those pillars where we have established the good collaboration already with our African partners, Africa Initiative 2. And there will also be an Africa Initiative 3 coming up. It will probably be launched in April next year when the work program of the next work program under Horizon Europe will be launched. Oopsie. Somebody is losing his... sorry, destroying here the stage. So Africa 2, I was at Africa 2. The innovation agenda I explained already briefly. I don't think there's a need to go into this. But again, I want to say that this innovation agenda has really achieved this higher level of collaboration between the institutions of the European Union and between, in particular, within the European Commission, DG RTD, INPA, and EAC. Which is already some sort of achievement, because as usual, it is not so easy to come together and to discuss and work together. But it also has achieved, when I look now at the Africa Charter, it has achieved also a wider sense of collaboration, I think, between African and European universities. And it is hopefully a helpful tool also for the future in terms of, like the Africa Charter, make the next steps and prepare the next steps and prepare the ground for more collaboration. I don't want to forget Euraccess Africa. That is a networking platform. It is more for support of individual researchers across the world, but it has a particular focus also on Africa, and it's supposed to help really international researchers moving around the various institutions they're working with. And with this, I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes,
Are we supposed to stay
just
here?
for 1 minute? Yeah, that's okay. So thank you so much for, in the short time that we gave you, for being able to deliver much of what you had. And I know that there are some issues for funding issues, some funding questions that were raised in our deliberations yesterday. And so hopefully you are around to the end of the program, so that because we do have a session where funding issues will come up again. And maybe there will be an opportunity to ask those questions. Yes. Thank you very much. You may take your seats. Thank you. We can have tea. Yes, tea time. And I'm sure if you wish, you can bring your cup of tea, drink, whatever, sit with you and drink while we go into our next session. But for now, let's have tea. And as we continue with our discussion of the implications of the Africa Charter's aspirations for further shaping of Africa-Europe research and innovation policy and funding, I will now call upon Dr. Vincento Lorusso, Policy Officer, STI Cooperation with the African Union and Bilateral Cooperation with Rwanda, Nigeria, South Africa, DG for Research and Innovation, European Commission, to come forward to deliver his speech on the AU-EU Innovation Agenda through the lens of the Africa Charter. Dr. Vincent Lorusso, please.
Thank you very much. And rather than coming forward, I came from a side. Ladies and gentlemen, dear academics, researchers, diplomats, friends and partners from Europe, Africa, and beyond, a very good morning to you all. I wish to thank the organizers of today's meeting for giving me the not-so-easy task, in my view, and hopefully for you too, intellectually stimulating opportunity to share with you in a food-for-thought, brainstorming fashion, if I may, way, the work that we're doing around the African Union, European Union Innovation Agenda, and trying, in a sort of devil's advocate way, to look at it through the lens, and I'm saying through the lens rather than against the lens of the Africa Charter. So bear with me while I do this exercise, and I look forward to your feedback, questions, and insightful thoughts. I will start with a preamble, and then indeed outline the work that we're doing around the implementation at the moment of the AU-EU Innovation Agenda, but also politically frame what we're doing why we are doing it. Potential room for improvement, question mark, addressed to you, colleagues, and then looking at the way forward. I'm very fond, usually, of future tense conjugations, bringing it all together from there. Natural partners. This was the wording that was used by our president, Madame Ursula von der Leyen, approximately 5 years ago, December 2019 in Addis Ababa, for a first mission outside European Union, specifically devoted to visiting a counterpart, chairperson, His Excellency Moussa Faki, in Addis Ababa. Natural partners, Africa and Europe, because of their evident geographical, historical, and cultural reasons, ties, that bring their peoples together. And I stress this out here. This is the preamble specifically focused on the work that we're doing and we're trying to do. The cooperation on research and innovation between Africa and Europe that I started calling, and I benefited from the endorsement of our higher ranking colleagues within the European Commission, DG RTD and beyond, the positive agenda of the Europe-Africa partnership. And in this slide, I try to elaborate on the reasons why we started calling it like that. And I believe this is the main reason, perhaps, possibly, hopefully, for which we're here. Indeed, because of the inherent collaborative, long-term, I heard this a couple of times from Professor John's presentation, and international natures beyond borders, research and innovation provides for a unique opportunity for an equitable, forward-looking, and sustainable Africa-Europe partnership. Now, and I thank my European Commission colleagues for having set, importantly, the scene for that, and mentioning that at intergovernmental level, setting up a political dialogue between the two unions represents a fundamental starting point to learn and better understand each other's needs and aspirations, identify and work on mutual interests. We can definitely talk, and we shall talk, about the points of divergence. This AU-EU innovation agenda provides the opportunity to have black and white the points of convergence, which represent the blueprint on which we will have to work and deliver. And this is also one of the reasons why we are here, and I try and put my brains, and certainly my spirit, into this presentation, to say that engaging at the grassroots level with a community of action, I'm quoting some of the language that is used around the Charter, of stakeholder organizations, I'm not really fond of this expression, but you see what I mean, I'm referring to you all, is essential to realize our core partnership with impact on the ground. I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted here when saying that this can have immense political and positive diplomatic and therefore geopolitical repercussions and implications. And to do so and to engage with an expanding community, I also believe that you too believe that communication is key. We need to be as intelligible to each other as possible. And I've heard this a few times over the past, well, since yesterday. I firmly believe that words matter, so does language, and so do nuances, right? So let me also take a moment to try and elaborate on what we mean by international cooperation in research and innovation. In the context, of course, of the AU Innovation Agenda, but broadly speaking, in the context of Africa-Europe cooperation in research and innovation. We refer to a two-way process, ladies and gentlemen, of collaboration, expected to generate opportunities and benefits to both parties involved, while addressing common challenges. So we're talking about a process that goes from Europe to Africa and back from Africa to Europe, to concern each of the two continents as much, and also within their boundaries, encompassing therefore intracontinental dimensions, working in the so-called Team Europe, and we're hearing this more and more coming from our fellow African institutions, Team Africa. Under the aegis of the AU-EU Innovation Agenda, we call this Team Africa-Europe. The policy context has already been elegantly explained by my colleagues earlier on. We are indeed working under the aegis of the so-called AU-EU high-level policy dialogue on science, technology, and innovation, which was institutionalized, as Jens mentioned, in 2010. The AU-EU Innovation Agenda stems from the first ever Research and Innovation Ministerial meeting that took place in July 2020, where the common realization that a lot of collaborative research had been done up until then between Africa and Europe, and yet more needs to be done to help and foster the translation of that research collaboration into tangible, positive impact on the ground. With this ambition and aspiration, this is how the AU Innovation Agenda started being conceived in July 2020. I wasn't in this space at that time. I was indeed in the stakeholder organization space, and I was watching this from not afar, but still with great interest. So I acknowledge the great work of my predecessors in this. And from a policy point of view, this agenda encompasses all these policy key milestone communications that you see in here. At global level, the UN SDGs 2030 agenda, of course, but African level, the AU Agenda 2063, STISA, Science and Technology Strategy for Africa 2024, and these are the days when STISA 2034 is being finalized at AU level, and at EU level, mentioned before also by Jean-Michel, the EU Comprehensive Strategy with Africa, March 2020 publication, and the EU Global Approach to Research and Innovation, adopted in May 2021 by the EU Council. This is politically meaningful, dear colleagues, to the point that the AU-EU Innovation Agenda was acknowledged in the final declaration of the last AU-EU Summit that took place here in Brussels in February 2022. The AU Innovation Agenda, as you can see from this excerpt here, is mentioned as an opportunity to step up scientific cooperation between researchers and develop knowledge together, as well as sharing technology and expertise between Africa and Europe. You can see some of the key programs that were presented earlier on, such as Erasmus+, with an ambition to be expanded, indeed, to enhance and strengthen this cooperation. This is indeed the final declaration of the summit, so it couldn't be more politically relevant than this. The overall structure of the agenda was also presented before. Just to say, and of course you receive slides and all hyperlinks, I promise, are working there. So we're talking about an agenda that in a sentence aims to foster the translation of research and innovation into products, services, businesses and job opportunities in both Africa and Europe. Easier said than done, that's for sure. But how to do this is through an overarching frame, which is organized with 4 objectives that you see in here, summarized by the running titles: make it real, generate impact by design, strengthen people and communities and institutions, learn, monitor, and scale it up. These 4 objectives are then articulated into short, medium, and long-term actions across the 4 priority areas of the cooperation that you also heard on earlier on, namely public health, green transition, innovation and technology, and capacities for science. And since we struggle to identify or to really put certain overarching actions within a given priority area, we then also, and by we I mean the Africa-Europe Working Group of the Innovation Agenda, we also introduce the additional priority area of cross-cutting issues. Now, these actions that are basically there to govern the cooperation in research and innovation for the next 9 years by now, because this agenda was politically adopted by ministers of research and innovation in July 2023. These objectives and actions were defined on the basis of an extensive mapping of the gaps and needs around the research and innovation ecosystems done in Africa and Europe, by this working group also relying on an advisory board of independent experts, which produced a specific report that I'm going to show you. Talking about funding instruments that will now have to contribute to the implementation and the realization of this agenda. At the EU side, we have indeed Horizon Europe with its Africa initiatives, of which you heard earlier on as well, and the Global Gateway Africa-Europe Investment Package, which has a dedicated flagship for the innovation agenda. While we say so, we will also have to foresee other instruments to be devised. At EU member states, therefore bilateral but also multilateral initiatives coming from individual member states, but also from the AU side, and therefore from AU member states. These are the chapters of the gaps and needs that were identified in this work carried out in the preparation of the agenda. You see them in here: innovation ecosystems, innovation management, knowledge exchange, including technology transfer, access to finance, and human capacity development. Throughout the identification of these gaps and needs, the working group, also through feedback of an open public consultation, of which I'm going to talk in a second, identified the importance of engaging with the African diaspora in Europe and elsewhere, including returnees to the African continent, to leverage their expertise and know-how in the area of creativity and innovation. This is the report of the Independent Advisory Research and Innovation Group, made of experts coming from both unions, that supported the identification of priorities in terms of gaps and needs that drove the conceptualization of the AU Innovation Agenda draft that was then published in the margins during the week of the AU-EU Summit in February, and then was made the subject to a public consultation, what we call the stakeholder dialogue process, which lasted throughout the year 2022. This is the overall summary in terms of recommendations, which I quoted here to hopefully echo some of the keywords that we find amongst the principles and the aspirations of the Charter. The recommendations recognizes the need for increased investment in institutional capacity and training, R&I policy and governance, infrastructure and institution, human capacity development, knowledge management and funding, and cooperation and partnerships. Wow, is there anything missing at all? Looking at the more epistemic imbalances kind of issues. It highlights the need for a balanced, respectful, transparent, visible, efficient partnership that follows the principles of good governance and high ethical standards. We are often confronted with the question, so practically speaking, what do we expect to have at the end of the implementation of the 10-year AU Innovation Agenda? And this is a list, apologies if it still remains high level, just to be fit in one slide, of some of the outcomes that we expect from the agenda. So creation, incubation, and expansion of new businesses and services across the areas that I mentioned, application of innovative tools in agriculture, medicine, climate and energy, manufacturing of health technologies, development and enhancement of transformative value chains, sustainable technology transfers, training and capacity building through strengthening and upgrading of R&D and higher education institutions, and creation and strengthening of networks enabling the actualization of the above deliverables. When we're talking about this of course needs to happen two ways. We're not just talking about unidirectional approach from Europe to Africa, but we're also looking at all the way around. And I took the time to include the principles and the power imbalances from which they aim to indeed address of the Charter, to keep them in mind in what I will try to outline of the work of the agenda. For example, amongst the aspects that I would like to highlight is the non-consideration, use, or generation of alternative knowledges coming from the African continent. We talked about the issue of languages. I'm going to touch upon this, and hopefully also some of the points related to the epistemic imbalances of this relationship. Looking at the development frame, I believe our presentations really touches upon some of the current structures and mechanisms when it comes to support to research and innovation cooperation between Africa and Europe, linked to the institutional resourcing as well. And last but not least, the practical arrangements which concerns at all, even in the policy space and institutional level, in terms of how we organize ourselves now that we are implementing this agenda, where the funding comes from, who manages the funds, who manages the projects, the programs, who monitor, evaluates, and learns from, and provides the learning from the implementation. Of course, when looking at the aspirations of the Africa Charter, it would be easy to say that we are concerned by the section pertaining to governments. Well, we know that the work goes well beyond that, so all aspirations are very much into play in the work that we're doing. So this presentation was also prepared with this in mind, hopefully. I was referring to the fact that the year 2022 was the year of the stakeholder dialogue, where we published the draft working version of the agenda, and we shared it openly with the community. We started with a public consultation that lasted from mid-February until end of June. The report is available online, and then we concluded, so to say concluded, because we never end, do we, the stakeholder dialogue with a stakeholder event in Nairobi and online in November 2022, where we had really thorough discussions about the work streams of the agenda and what had to be taken into account into the final version that indeed was adopted in July 2023. We had a really wide participation in the public consultation, the online one, from higher education institutions coming from both Africa and Europe. Overall, more than 50% of respondents were from higher education institutions, and of course research included in that. Higher education institutions represented the 52% of the organizations from Africa and 35% of responding organizations from Europe. I take the opportunity also to thank those of you, including higher education and research institutions network, that participated in this public consultation. You know who you are, also because I'm going to publicly show this in the next few slides. And I'm not doing this necessarily because of that, I promise. I'm also doing this to show and perhaps make a few comments and highlight the fact that we not only, please allow me the term, have the usual suspects in this slide. I'm very pleased to see entities such as Namibia University, Stellenbosch universities that are part of these discussions. I'm also very pleased to see a really large representation of Algerian higher education and research institutions. I'm also very pleased to see universities from Western Kenya that we may not see all the time in such fora and networks. So again, I salute everybody's engagement, including the massive work that RUFORUM did with us to mobilize faculties of agricultural sciences in those universities that are not necessarily those that have the most established track record in the excellence funding program. European higher education institutions and network. Here we see also a large commitment of networks in partnership, of course, with ARUA in the case of the Guild, but also the networks such as CIVIS and so on and so forth. So much gratitude to all the networks and the higher education and research institutions that contributed to this work. On the stakeholder event that took place in Nairobi, just showing really some images that may be speaking better than my words. These were the dedicated thematic workshops where we had really discussions across the priority of the areas of interventions of the agenda, with input that was coming across different sectors, private sector, higher education research institutions, civil society organizations, and so on and so forth. We then organized the first edition of the AU-EU Innovation Fair, where we gave space to entrepreneurs and innovators coming from Africa and Europe to pitch about their solutions and then present them in an exhibition space. I'm not going into the detail of grassroots innovations in today's presentation, but I would like to highlight the fact that this was an unprecedented initiative in the sense that we went to the point of creating something that now needs to be repeated. And I can only be pleased about that despite the work that this entails. And this is an electric vehicle 3D demonstration by a startup from Nairobi and France. So again, with innovators and entrepreneurs showcasing their innovations and engaging with peers, but also with investors, and including also public sector investment. We then decided to bring this to the next level with the AU-EU Innovation Festival in Cape Town and online in June 2023, which really marked the start of the implementation of this agenda. We brought it all together, and I would like to highlight the fact that there we decided also to go more into the details of some of the structural aspects that are at the core of the Charter. We then decided to have an Agora session on youth-led innovations, but also an Agora session on women-led innovations, again, with intervention and testimonials coming from the higher education and research institutional space, grassroots innovations from both Africa and Europe, with still involvement of NGOs and civil society organizations as well. We then brought this to the bilateral/multilateral space, and this year we hosted the first edition with the contribution, of course, of the EU delegation to Nigeria, of the Nigeria EU Innovation Days. Nigeria being Nigeria, that we realized that we had to devote space also to the creative industries, which is, of course, very linked to social sciences and humanities. And what we did is that we had a dedicated session showcasing Afrobeat, showcasing the movie industry of Nigeria and fashion designs. A bit of the atmosphere and the vibe in the room. But like this wasn't enough, we decided to have a workshop called Slam Poetry for Innovators. I'm bringing this up because there's a language component in here. We very much welcome Pidgin English amongst the contributions, and not only that, we also welcome contributions in Yoruba, Hausa, Igbo, although we didn't get many. When we got them, we checked against ChatGPT, sorry, but this was still a good attempt. We had quite a few contributions coming from a lot of Nigerian youth. And to try and lead by example, I also made my attempt still in Pidgin English, and apologies if that is not necessarily very rigorous as how it should be. The agenda looks the way it is now. Of course, you're familiarized with it if you're not very familiar with it yet. Importantly to say that there's a technical roadmap that supports the agenda, which was published also upon implementation, which provides information on the governance, the coordination of the implementation, and the monitoring, evaluation, and learning. I'm moving towards the end of my presentation, I promise. In here you see the objectives more in detail of the agenda. The text that you see in red is not to play too much chromatically, but to highlight the fact that this is still a summary of the objectives compared to what you see in the actual text, but the text in red is the text that was added onto the final version, coming from the input and feedback that we received from stakeholders organizations. And let me spend a few seconds to comment on some keywords and phrases that I believe are really in line with the work and with the aspirations and principles of the Charter, of the Africa Charter. For Make It Real, objective number 1, translate innovative capacities and achievements into tangible outputs, ensure that also local innovation, grassroots projects, and less codified forms of knowledge are taken into account, leveraging on knowledge coming from humanities and social sciences as well. Or let me also get to objective number 3, strengthen people, communities, and institutions, for which we added language on. In doing so, care will be taken involving also the African diaspora and empowering communities, also through citizen science initiatives. There's a clear reference in this case, also on strengthening R&I infrastructure and cooperation, and considering the need for creating and sustaining employment opportunities and job attractiveness for youth and women. And on the last objective, learn, monitor, and scale it up, we included a clear language, again, on youth, women, and vulnerable groups. And we've also provided a specific definition of what we mean by vulnerable groups, to be as specific indeed and concrete as we can. These are the actions still in summary compared to the actual text that you will find on the agenda. Because of the lack of time, please allow me just a few commenting on those for which I highlighted the number in red. I think somehow they address some of the imbalances and issues that are presented by the Charter. For cross-cutting issues, short-term action, proactive involvement of citizens in the innovation ecosystems. For green transition, action number 6, supporting the development and scale-up of efficient and sustainable management of cultural heritage and cultural practices. In this case, we include a language on support and reactivation of traditional skills. We use on purpose, deliberately traditional, to also include indigenous knowledge and know-how, which gets, in our views, in the policy space, a lot of debate on what we mean by that, while we thought traditional was more inclusive compared to the former. And for capacities for science, strengthening, action number 1, strengthening R&D cooperation between AU, EU, higher education, governmental institutions through knowledge transfer, teaming, twinning, and learning mobility activities. Improving transparency, recognition of qualifications, relevance of curricula and enhanced mobility. And action number 3, setting up training programs in the priority areas of AU, EU cooperation in R&I to increase youth employability. And as we move from short-term to medium-term, you see a few actions here highlighted: cross-cutting issues, reskilling, upskilling citizens to profit from innovation and technologies to prevent inequalities and or discriminations according to SDGs 8, 9, and 13, ensuring sustainability of research mobility programs by providing conducive support infrastructures for scholars returning to Africa to create jobs, entrepreneurship, and startups. Some of this was also evoked during the small group discussion at the table that I was honored to be working in. And ensure tech transfer and improving and developing affordable, equitably available, and accessible quality vaccines, medicines, and health technologies for public health. For capacities for science, promoting joint master doctoral degrees between AU universities and mobility of researchers. Long term, just 2 comments on 2 actions in the interest of time. For cross-cutting issues, promoting R&D with a special focus on youth, women, vulnerable groups, and demography. for innovation and technology, reinforcing and facilitating inclusive, affordable access to world-class research and innovation infrastructure. Now, for this to happen, of course, we need to work in a multi-sector and multidisciplinary approach, and I believe you would agree on that. The AU Innovation Agenda is now 1 year old, so we celebrated in July the first year anniversary from the political adoption. And of course, we are in full implementation mode. My colleagues mentioned earlier on some of the partnerships that contribute to the implementation of the agenda. And European and Developing Countries Clinical Trial Partnership is a big partnership, indeed, that contributes to a lot of the implementation of the public health actions of the agenda. It's not the only one that does that, of course not, but does a big contribution. And I'm bringing this up also because some of the principles that are at the core of the Africa Charter are also taken into account of the DCTP partnership. There was a publication in a very, very recent one on how research equity is thoroughly taken into account in this partnership, and this was also taken into account in its prior edition. So EDCTP now is in the third cycle of funding, the Global Health EDCTP3 joint undertaking, and EDCTP2 already was working on these principles that are, of course, in line with other initiatives that are also recognized in the literature around the Africa Charter, like the UK Collaborative Development and Research and Essence, indeed. As we are in full implementation mode, we try and do this as openly as we can with the stakeholder community of action. And we run a series amongst several initiatives. We run a series of biannual workshops. The next one will focus on public health innovations happening online and in person in Pretoria. So the announcement is indeed here. And we also have several initiatives around, indeed, implementing the agenda across the priority areas. So the next two workshops for next year will happen in May and most likely November 2025. And the exact topics are yet to be defined. So suggestions and contributions will be more than welcome. This is the announcement of the workshop happening on December 3rd. The AU e-Innovation Interface is the one-stop shop web portal. I don't like the stop in this case verb, but it's, let's say, the go-to web portal, where we really publish on a regular basis resources and opportunities pertaining to the implementation of the agenda, including Euraccess Africa, which is indeed this partnering tool. And there's a partnering tool if you go and look for jobs and opportunity in the section of the Euraccess Africa networking platform, you can potentially find your collaborators. You basically enter a keyword, an African country, an European country, or elsewhere where you would like to find a collaborator. You can also enter a keyword according to the area of work in which you would like to find a collaboration, and you hopefully find a rather large list of potential partners there. The Africa Initiative was already mentioned earlier on, is this package of topics and calls for proposals from Horizon that encourage or require participation of African institutions in the consortia, in the project consortia that will be eventually granted. We are working now on the Africa Initiative 3, which will be indeed announced by beginning of next year. And of course, while we do that, it's important that we monitor how are we doing in terms of enhancing participation coming from African and African institutions. So we need to constantly compare how are we doing across the African countries in terms of submitted proposals, retained proposals, and average success rate. Now, we haven't got the time to go into the details here. These are only apologies for those countries that are not represented in here. These are the top 28 African countries when it comes to their participation in the framework program. We can generally say that overall, they're all doing better than what they did in the entirety of the 7 years of the previous framework program, which is a great success in both numbers of proposals that are submitted and retained and the average success rate. But it's easy to stop there, right? Let's look at the Malawi case. Malawi could still do better compared to the previous framework program. So we are here for that. We are here also to disclose that and to work in making the good turn into better and the better, betterer, because I couldn't say best. The dashboard of the AU Innovation Agenda is a living inventory, a living repository, where we are including all initiatives that are in line with the objectives and the different actions of this agenda, regardless of the funding entity and implementation entity, whether AU, EU, or from elsewhere, as long as they are in line with a checklist of 10 principles that we as a working group defined and presented in this very dedicated page. This is how the dashboard looks like. You see the thematic area, the action title, and then the initiatives that are aligned to them. The starting date, the end date, the budget that is attached to them, regardless of the size, funding entity, implement entity. You see also Washington state-based or headquartered organizations that are not necessarily EU or AU, with implementing entities from the African continent. I take this opportunity to also highlight the great involvement of the clusters of research excellence, ARUA and the Guild Initiative, that have been extremely supportive and, I would say, positively stimulating and critical of the work that we're doing, and indeed proposing that the clusters of excellence will be included in the dashboard of the AU Innovation Agenda in light of the contribution that they do to the implementation. We see also member states initiatives such as initiatives run implemented by in Italy, well, by the Italian corporation, by the Italian corporation in Kenya, Ethiopia, and Sudan and Egypt. Budget size can be really diverse, and so on and so forth for other areas, including NGOs working in the area of human trafficking in Nigeria and Niger. So again, the actions of the agenda are expected to be really cross-cutting from a thematic point of view. There is indeed room for social sciences and humanities as well. These are the 10 principles. I initially started putting a square and highlighting some of them, but then I realized it wasn't worth it. We're talking about 10 principles that I believe are all embedding the aspirations and the principles of the Charter, and therefore aiming to address the imbalances that are mentioned in the Charter. Perhaps let me highlight the co-ownership one, whether financial or in kind, from conceptualization to implementation and monitoring and evaluation of results. Importantly, also provide tangible, measurable socioeconomic development in Africa and of Europe, or the dedication as well to vulnerable groups and their entrepreneurship, of course, in addition to youth and women. I'm really concluding, I promise. And I couldn't do so without a call for action. If you like the background, let's acknowledge the beauty of Imigongo from Rwanda. If I hopefully have your attention now, this is my call for action. As you join the Charter, and for those of you who already joined the Charter, that I understood more than 100 signatories, you have no excuse, I'm afraid. Please consider the following. Please consider indeed submitting an expression of interest for the dashboard of the AU Innovation Agenda in light of these 10 principles that I present, well, that you see outlined here. If you recognize, if your initiative you think finds itself recognizable in these 10 principles, and then identify the actions of the agenda to whose implementation your initiative, program, project, partnership, scholarship, regardless of the size in funding, is contributing to, then please make an expression of interest. You'll find the link for expression of interest here, and then here to hopefully make it handy for you. We are monitoring evaluation what we're doing, starting from the impact of year one, and I'm bringing this to an end just to say that in the framework methodology that we developed, we also taking into serious account some of the principles that are part of this discussion. Dissemination of knowledge, strengthening of capacity building, coordination mechanisms, stakeholder outreach and engagement, sustained effects of AU-EU cooperation in innovation networks, and AU-EU co-ownerships. And this theory of change is then translated in a set of indicators that are outlined in here. If you want to know more on how we started from a narrative point of view, we put together a paper that we then submitted in an open science, open source, open access resource that I believe all of you know. Really, the ending points is not all going very well. I mean, I'm not here to sing our own praises. Let's tackle the elephants in the room, and here I'm citing some of those that I've heard of yesterday, and I came to this room with today. Unidirectional funding, we talk about co-ownership, identification of problems, implementation involving local communities. What about indeed co-funding from both sides that leads into shared responsibilities and shared accountabilities? I heard from our African brothers and sisters importance of making investments at country level. Of course, at AUC level in Addis, this is also being very much enforced. Fostering mobility at regional, continental, and intercontinental level. Visa issues, as much as an Africa and Europe problem, as much as an intra-African problem. Languages, and I haven't got a firm proposal here, apart from we heard some examples of some papers being multilingual, but in that case, maybe we need to forget about indexes and so on and so forth. Addressing disparities within our two continents and unions. continuing and strengthening instruments that are available, not to reinvent the wheel. Horizon Europe, Africa Initiative, one of them, MCSA, Erasmus+, promoting national and regional collaborations. National collaboration. So in Africa Initiative 2, in some calls, we ask for participation of entities coming from at least 3 African Union member states. When we have those info sessions, we also suggest the strong track record players, the Stellenbosch universities, the University of Cape Town, to also engage with historically disadvantaged universities in South Africa. And for the latter, to sort of shadow those institutions that have a strong track record and learn from them in a way that this can really turn into a positive, a virtuous circle. And overcome Africa's brain drain. This is something that we should keep in mind. This is the very last slide. To conclude, because we never conclude, do we? Because of their intrinsic features I noted, R&I in education can prove being instrumental tools, the enablers for the necessary transformative collaborations between Africa and Europe. To a great extent, I believe that the Africa Charter is already living and beating inside the AU innovation agenda, with, of course, the elephants that I mentioned earlier on. On the way forward, I would suggest that efforts should be taken to ensure an enhanced expression of principles of equity and equitable partnerships. And I'm quoting here the word coming from some of the scholars that are championing this literature, building on the successes of existing equitable partnership frameworks and adding substantive value to issues that remain unaddressed. For this to happen, obvious to say, perhaps, that everybody's input is needed to ensure knowledge production translates into tangible impact. But let me also say, I updated this last night, avoiding fragmentation, unifying efforts through an expanding, because that's what we ultimately aim for, community of action. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think this was really comprehensive, lots of information to digest, and we need time to go through the documents. And I'm sure if people have questions, there is a way of reaching out to the organization to seek clarification. But maybe I'll give 1 or 2 questions quickly. 1 or 2 questions, yes. Okay, let's take a second one quickly. Any second question? Okay, good. I think she represents a lot of people.
Thank you very much.
Oh, there is somebody? Yes. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I think you speak to the points. So my name is Jan from the Yale. So we have quite a number of clusters that are led by the social sciences and humanities within the AU innovation agenda and other clusters that are on AI and so forth are really keen to also work with our social sciences and humanities. So we've always seen the innovation agenda as extremely supportive, and I think it's also shown how actually it includes, in response to stakeholder feedback, includes what we do. But can I add to that question very quickly? To what extent are you using the platform of the AU agenda also to have discussions with other funders to bring them on board with these principles that we just really endorse?
Thank you very much. I promise Jan and I didn't prepare this right before. So for humanities, I promise there's humanities and social sciences in the actions of the agenda. What I bore in those slides is just a summary of them. And so the actual actions in the text, in the final version of the agenda, really contemplate work in humanities and social sciences. It's not there in the title, because the title was coming from a agreed hunger for innovation to be prominent in the wording, also for the sake of conciseness. But there's space in the actions, especially coming from the working version to the final version. I promise that I'm happy to share with highlighted parts that are concerned. Indeed, clusters of research excellence are already working in that space. Yes, so the dashboard is really designed for stakeholder organizations, Jan, for them to go through the dashboard and see who's also contributing to the implementation of the respective actions, different organizations, to potentially collaborate or ideally even synergize with each other. And it's a never-ending effort. So we are constantly, Jan, approaching development agencies, funding institutions, multilateral ones, UN organizations, talking to higher education institutions to engage them as much with their secured funding, with their running projects in the dashboard.
Okay. Thank you very much for that very helpful response. I'm sure we will be able to engage you further as we are networking. Yes, thank you very much. As I now leave time to Mr. Jens Hogo, team leader for our panel debate. Who are going to be exploring the question, what are the implications of the Africa Charter and avenues for further shaping Africa-Europe research funding, policy, and regulatory frames? You can take 15 more minutes from the time when you were supposed to finish, I'm told. So don't, because we've eaten into your time. So you can extend if you need to 15 more minutes. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe, if you allow me, because we need to populate the chairs here, to call for, where's my telephone? Sorry. What? Okay. No, I'll call them, don't worry. So maybe I'll call on Are Straume to join us here for the panel discussion. So Are has extensive experience from international research and innovation collaboration through many years abroad. He was working for the Danish Ministry of Science and Technology. He was also working for this ministry during the Danish presidency of the EU. Sorry, I'm cutting it a bit short. Counselor for Research and Higher Education, you worked for the Norwegian Embassy in Washington for a number of years, also accredited to Canada. So that's already a wide field. And then you came back to Brussels. No, sorry, you came back to the University of Bergen. There you were employed as senior advisor for EU strategic affairs at the Research and Innovation Department, and now you are working as a section manager for the section of international cooperation in the same department. Thank you for joining us this morning. So the next one, and sorry, I forgot to say, Are is stepping in for Professor Margaret Hagen. She had to return to Norway, I understood, as a matter of urgency. So Are will take her place. Then I would like to call on Professor Kenneth Matengu. Professor Matengu, please join us. Professor Matengu, good morning. You were the Vice Chancellor of the University of Namibia since August 2018, and you were a Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation and Development. He's a member of the steering committee, has been a member of the steering committee for the Southern African Innovation Support Program, that's very interesting, and has reviewed innovation systems in several members of the Southern African Development Community countries. In addition to that, Professor Matengu has led national development initiatives as a key technical expert. He has research expertise his research expertise includes innovation, technology policy, access and equity in education, there we are again, higher education governance, numerous publications on these topics, and he plays a significant role in shaping innovation and product development systems in Namibia. Welcome to the panel. The next colleague that I want to call upon is Dr. Lydia Borrell-Damian. Please join us on the panel. Sorry, I have a long list of names here. So you are Secretary General of the South Science Europe since 2019. Previously, you served as Director for Research and Innovation at the European University Association, focusing on European and global research and innovation policies, including business, R&I, and energy. Dr. Borrell Damian also held roles as Director of Research at Pompeu Fabra University and has been an assistant professor and visiting scholar in the US and Canada. She contributes to several international advisory committees, including the Global Research Council, and holds a doctorate in chemistry with a specialty in chemical engineering from the University of Barcelona. I like engineers. Welcome to the panel. Dr. Anna Persic is the next person I want to call upon. Dr. Anna Persic, good morning. Good morning. You are a program specialist for science, technology, and innovation policies and open science at the UNESCO headquarters in Paris. And an ecologist by training with a PhD in exotoxicology, Dr. Persic joined UNESCO in April 2006 and worked since then as science specialist at the UNESCO Liaison Office in New York, from 2011 to 2018. Her work relates to strengthening the science policy interface and promoting, which is very important, and promoting science, technology, and innovation in implementing the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. She coordinated the development of the UNESCO recommendation on open science and is currently working towards its implementation. Thank you for joining. And then I have one last candidate, Mrs. Karin Schneider. Please join us. Mrs. Karin Schneider, you are the head of Central Africa Unit at the Belgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You are a historian by background, and you have been working at the ministry in Belgium for 20 years already. Long career. You were initially responsible for the ministry's relations with international organizations in Brussels and joined the Director General Development Cooperation and Humanitarian Aid 8 years ago. You are now the head of bilateral cooperation with Central Africa, or Central African countries, and serve as a focal point for academic and scientific cooperation within this role. Thank you for joining. Okay, so maybe I explain a little bit the what this panel is about. Sorry. Yeah? George. I forgot George. Sorry. George, please join us here. Professor George Openjuru.
How did I drop off the list?
Please, 5 extra minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I used an old template here. So, Professor George Openjuru, you are the Vice Chancellor of the Gulu University in Uganda and an expert in education. You served previously as Deputy Vice Chancellor at Makerere University, Uganda, and contributed to educational reforms through your role as a director of the Institute of Adult and Continuing Education. Your specialization is in adult and community education with a specific focus on adult literacy education, educational exclusion and social justice, action research, community university engagement, lifelong learning, and indigenous knowledge and knowledge democracy. You chair the Uganda Adult Education Network. That's very good. So, welcome to you all again. And now, please. And now a little bit about this panel. So we heard about the Africa Charter. Some of you, or maybe all of you, I don't know, have read the Charter and had maybe a number of questions. At least I had a number of questions. So the panel is now tasked to look at a certain, two questions in principle, but these are very, very essential questions, not only for the Africa Charter, but also in terms of the relations between the EU and Africa. The questions, I will raise the question in a moment. Each of you will have an opportunity to come in on the two questions. I do not divert, I do not change the questions between the panelists, but of course, I would be happy if you have also a little bit of feedback between each other, if you want, of course, and if you want to respond to certain issues that have been raised by your fellow panelists. You have 2 to 3 minutes to answer the questions from your perspective. If there will be follow-up issues raised, we will allow that, of course. And then after the end of the first round of question, you have 1 minute of follow-up reflection if you consider that necessary or if you want to have famous last words. I will try to wrap up at the end, and then we come to the second round of question, but it will be the same way. Okay? Very good. Now, the concept that was prepared for this panel reads as follows. To what extent do policy actors consider the need for deeper transformation in collaborative research that goes beyond addressing symmetries in concrete project arrangements or management processes to redress the multi-layered underlying power imbalances that arise through disparities in institutional capacities and through dominant use of Eurocentric epistemologies, languages, concepts, theories, and the development frame itself in the production of scientific knowledge? Can you offer concrete examples from your own experience? Okay, shall we start at the far end?
I thought you would start with the nearest person.
That's the surprise effect.
No, thank you for the question. My take is that there is currently studies that shows that there is what some have called, I think there's a Finnish researcher called Anssi Pasi, who has written about academic apartheid. In other words, the practice of discrimination in knowledge production and dissemination. And this features in the form of ways in which publications are rated, the universities are ranked, the practices of determining what is measurable, what is meaningful, what is excellent, what is standards.
Okay.
And I think in the context of the Charter, that means we have to bring in some revisions of guidelines and policies on what we assign funding to, and how that funding should be meaningful to the institutions that are in a relations.
Right.
But also this means embedding these in the institutional practices, whether that is at the funding level, but also from the implementation level. But for the African continent, this also requires a little bit more work. I will put it as sociological work to get deeper institutional cultures and ensure that those institutional cultures or organizational cultures, but I prefer more institutional cultures, that the policies around that are embedded. And that I think for me is important because there are different levels and authorities of how the funding is used when it comes. Some universities don't have autonomy completely. Others have autonomy. Others are in between.
Okay.
And so in our policy consideration, and if in practice, when we are talking about those imbalances and dominances of the powers, they may actually mean you would find that some universities would account, but the way they account would mean, from the funding perspective, that they have failed to account or implement.
Yeah.
But that is because they don't have the autonomy from their own governments, and there are limits on how they would use the money and so on. That's my initial take to the question.
I think I heard some of this already this morning in the presentation from Arua. So, yeah, okay.
Yes. Thank you very much. And apologies for my rector. She was called by the Ministry of Defense for a meeting on a very short notice. And she, of course, would very much like to be here, but she had to prior to us that meeting. Thank you for having us. Thank you for organizing this. The University of Bergen, as my rector, Margaret Haugen, said yesterday, we have long and extensive collaborations with several African partners. We have over 60 years of collaboration with the University of Khartoum. We have over 35 years of collaboration with the University of Makerere. And our take is that to develop these equal partnerships, it takes time. You have to invest and you have to work together on all levels over years and to really invest from the university themselves into this. But of course, in the context of the charter, there are also things that we see as a university that should be done and more on the systemic level in both the Global North and the Global South. Just to go through some of the aspects that we think should be done is to more focus on the co-creation of actual research programs. We have heard today from the European Commission in several instances that there are co-creation going on. But I think it's also must apply more to the actual research programs. And I, of course, allude to the Horizon Europe program. I think we need to include stakeholders from both continents better in developing the research programs that, especially the research program that specifically targets North-South cooperation. And additionally, of course, as we always say in the EU, only about 10% or less than 10% of funding for research is done at the European level. So this also applies for the national funding levels, that they need to look into how they actually co-create research programs with research councils on the African continent. We also see that in order to develop good and competitive research and education institutions, it is important to have good national research funding system on the African continent. So this has to be kind of prioritized by African countries to develop robust research ecosystems. By, for instance, having independent national research council with good funding, and that this funding is actually allocated through the peer review process. I think this is really, really important in order to develop these robust research systems within countries in general. And also, which was mentioned earlier here today, we need to have funding in all academic fields. For instance, we must not forget the importance of social sciences and humanities in addressing societal challenges, as well as being an integral part of most STEM-related issues. And a third point I want to make before I leave the microphone, pass the microphone, is the division between the different funding streams. We have, at least in Norway, very strong and long traditions through NORAD with higher education and research programs within the kind of development aid funding stream. And we have the Research Council of Norway having kind of large research programs. But there are few linkages between these two streams. And I think also we need to have the kind of the donors and the research councils, and at European level we need kind of the two DGs to have more kind of linkages between the real programs. And a final point is that we need also to have go from these kind of high-level dialogues to actual programs that are reachable for the individual researchers at the higher education institution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. I was just wondering, Vincenzo, we should probably think about a study, because we still have money for next year to look into this field. What I would be interested in, of course, from our perspective, the European Commission, I can't speak for the African side now, but for the European Commission, I can see already where are the issues that we need to address. But for the member state, the EU member states, it's include, well, Norway is not a member state, but of course a friendly country. It would be interesting to understand how those considerations are taken into account at national level. Because as you said, I mean, 10% of research and innovation funding comes from the EU, well, is managed by the EU, comes from the EU member states as well. But 90% is really what the bulk of the money, and there we have not so much idea about what is really going on in the national administrations, how this is being considered. Okay, thank you. Please.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Yes, so I fully subscribe what you both said and what many speakers have been saying all along this event. First of all, I would like to thank the initiative, the Charter. I really welcome it, and I think it is great. And I would like to thank especially all the colleagues in Africa who are raising their voice more and better to say, we need to change because that's not the way. I think this is very, no, I'm saying timely, but it's not the word, because in a way we should have done that way before. Anyway, welcome the words, welcome the voices. So please, first of all, thank you, and let's keep raising those voices, because these are very important. Talking to researchers, directors of department, leaders in institutional research organizations, etc., is of essence to hear what they go through, the challenges. I'm speaking here on behalf of national European research funding and research performing organizations. We met in our yearly event in Madrid 2 years ago, well, actually less than 2 years ago, 1 year ago, in November 2023, to study reciprocity in international research cooperation. And we used, for that event, we chose 2 regions, Africa and Latin America. And I have to say that the plea for reciprocity, it's unanimous in Africa and in Latin America. We got like 30 speakers from both continents going to Madrid. And their testimonies were so compelling, so strong. And it was a call for action to us in Science Europe to say we need to do something, and at least to help those voices to reach the right frames and the right circles to do something about it. In the framework of the United Nations Science Summit that took place in September this year, we organized a session with 2 panels with people from the 5 continents, all to discuss reciprocity in multilateral research collaboration. And again, the plea was unanimous.
Okay.
But then we went deeper, and it says, what does it mean? We all hear these voices, decolonization. What does it mean? What does it really mean?
Yeah.
We all know definitions.
Yeah.
There are many studies, but what does it really mean in the field? And that means a lot of things, and probably different things in different regions. But we need to make an effort to define what it means, to be able to incorporate that in the definition of programs for research. And this is not just because we are affected by grand societal challenges that no one country can tackle on its own. It is because it's a human aspect.
Yeah.
And we, as research organizations, we are bound to this humanity. So I think that despite the differences, we can put tags, global north, global south. Yes, these are practical words. Decolonization is a practical word, which in fact we should aim to abolish. We should not talk in some years down the line. We should not talk about decolonization because it should have been achieved. We should not talk about global north or global south because there are pockets of global north in the global south and pockets of global south in the global north. So we should try and use these terms for what they mean, which is just a practical classification to do something, but with the aim that in a few years we won't talk about that. You see?
Yeah.
I know this is very difficult to
No, but
do in
I like the
implementation, but
pragmatic
it is
approach.
something that it has to have to back in the mind of all of us.
Yeah.
Because as at least I'm a stakeholder, I'm not a government, but we can raise the voice to the governments. We can raise the voice to supranational organizations. And we can collaborate with this.
Yes. Yes.
So I think that it is very important to have the human dimension in all this.
Yes.
Because we are all providers and of knowledge and learners of knowledge, no matter where we are.
Yes. Always.
Always, exactly. But this needs to be really embedded into policies and practices.
Yes. Yes.
And that's much easier said than done, but it requires a change of mindset of all of us, no matter where we live. We need to build that common objective that we are here, at least in this community of researchers. I think we are preaching to the converted, but really to put science at the service, in the good sense of the word, of society. And for that, and with this I will finish, access to scientific knowledge is of utmost importance. I would say almost the key issue, because no access to knowledge, no research. Therefore, we need to make a great effort that science is considered as a public good, truly, and in honoring that statement, which has been made by many, we really make it public, which is not, we are far from that at this point.
I appreciate you mentioned, I mean, I would translate it in talking in headlines is not a good way forward. It's probably better to really use a more pragmatic and down-to-earth approach and really name what are the issues instead of, I mean, scientific apartheid, I had never heard that term, but I think I understand what it means, and it was certainly used to be provocative, I imagine. I'm not sure, but at the same time, there is the underlying, what are the underlying issues? That's the next question, right? And this is why I would always appreciate the more down-to-earth approach and to really talk about the issues that are at hand. But thank you very much. Anna.
Yes, so I come from UNESCO. I've worked in UNESCO for 20 years, and the discussion about the role of international scientific collaborations in peace building, in sustainable development, is really at the heart of what we do at UNESCO. So UNESCO is the UN agency that deals with education, science, and culture, as drivers and enablers of peace. So in 1945, when the organization was funded, it was in the minds of those who funded them that actually these scientific collaborations are transformative, and that actually the connections between all the countries in the field of science is extremely important for humanity. Now the question is, what is taking so long for that vision from that time to actually be translated into real action? And how can we accelerate the implementation of visions that come at these levels at the local level? It's great to see that at the institutional level right now, there is this uptake and the thinking of importance of, bi-directional exchanges. Again, in UNESCO's language, in our constitution, it has been there for, since the beginning. So really, I'm wondering, how do we make sure as a community that these visions, plans, norms that we have at the international level get taken by national and institutional entities much, much faster, particularly today when we do have, the digital and other environments that allow us to do things faster. So why are we taking so long? So in UNESCO, in this long history of really looking into international scientific collaborations as tools for peace building, what has been done, I think, is to create platforms for exchanges at the equal level between the different nations, between scientists from different nations, really looking at each other and asking for help from each other as well. It was also done around setting joint agendas through the international and intergovernmental scientific programs, like the Man and the Biosphere program, which looked into biodiversity issues, again, since the 70s. The International Hydrological Program, and still going on very strongly. These are the programs where scientists from different countries, together with their governments, set up the agenda and then work together towards the implementation of that agenda. Again, I think expanding the methodologies maybe and the principles of collaboration in those international programs might be something that we from UNESCO should be communicating on much more to also advance the discussions in fora like these. And besides creating this international intergovernmental scientific program, so I mentioned the Man and the Biosphere program, International Hydrological Program, the International Basic Sciences Program, MOST, which is a social sciences transformative program as well, oceanographic program, so lots of different areas, but really looking into the issues that the countries together decided would be issues that they need to work on, rather than advancement of national strategies or national interest on some scientific, particular scientific issues. Again, we didn't get it perfectly well, but I think there is a lot to learn from the wealth of experience that we have with these international scientific programs. And the other important thing is really providing standards, norms around shared values and principles. And here, maybe just to mention the UNESCO recommendation on open science that I was very privileged to be a part of and lead. And I'm happy to see it mentioned also in the Charter, because I do see that there is a lot of overlap and synergies between the principles in the open science recommendation and in the Charter. And I do see the Africa Charter as a tool, another tool that helps implement the recommendation, which, by the way, has been negotiated by 193 countries and now adopted by 194 countries. So you have an instrument that actually has been adopted by your countries as a framework to advance work on national and institutional levels as well. And I think what is important with this recommendation and translates also in the Africa Charter and what we've been talking about here before, it is about access to knowledge, but it also goes beyond access to knowledge and access to kind of the outputs of science, but really talks about access to the entire process of science. So it's opening science more broadly to society, really kind of democratizing the entire scientific process. And that again means through scientific collaborations across regions, across disciplines, that are equitable and that are also transformative because they're also useful for society. So I think I'm going to stop here, and then if there are questions, maybe continue. But really these connections, open science, transformative, equitable partnerships, it's a movement towards the transformation of the scientific systems across the world. Because we need more from science right now. We need it to be more closer to the society. We have a bunch of issues that have to be solved, including through science, and it has to be more connected to people in general.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the decisive point. It has to be connected to people. And I mean, that's the same for the European Commission, I think, as it is probably for UNESCO. You're working at a very high level, supranational level, but you never know what happens then when it comes to the implementation of the policies, the guidelines, the whatever you work on in the various countries. And like in Namibia, for example, or in Uganda, is this really kind of ending up in the right hands? And how do these people, what do they make of it? That's always a question. And probably it's the same, as I said, for you as for us. We can't be everywhere. So we also depend very much on our constituencies, that they take those guidance and those principles as not only as a piece of paper, but also something that has to be lived or has to be implemented at some stage, and they take the necessary actions. And yeah, it's with every policies we are creating, and the European Commission or Union is quite good in preparing or doing legislation, but when it comes to implementing it, there's always a disconnect. And for me, the most famous piece of scientific knowledge that has never been really addressed is the, what's it called, the Club of Rome climate reports that started in the 1970s. And until like 10, 15 years ago, nobody really considered what was in those reports. We could have taken action already 20 years ago, probably, or 30 years ago, but yeah, we were all very complacent in our way of doing business. Sorry for that, but okay. Karin, do you want to?
Yes, at a lower level, maybe, as a Belgian ministry, I just can maybe give some information about how we finance the academic cooperation. We have, we are a little country, but quite complex institutionally. So we have a federal competence for development cooperation, but the academics, the university are at another level, regional level. So it's quite complex to fund, but to implement the academic cooperation, we have two umbrella organizations of one of the Dutch-speaking universities and what for the French-speaking universities, VLIR, UOS, and ARES. And they have a budget to propose us programs of academic cooperation. The budget is more or less 60 million per year for both. And the programs they propose are implemented by the university university college and schools for arts, beside their own cooperation and collaboration from Belgian university to other universities. The partner countries of the academic cooperation are in Africa, Latin America and Asia. And for Africa, there is a complementarity between the Dutch-speaking universities and the French-speaking universities. French-speaking universities are more collaborating with West Africa, Central Africa, Madagascar, and the Dutch-speaking universities are collaborating with East and Southern Africa and Central Africa also, because we have an history with Central Africa, so every university has partners there. The basic principle of the financing is the right of initiative for all the academic cooperation, but also all the non-governmental cooperation. The Belgian Development Department doesn't pilot the programs. It's really the initiative of the actors to propose us their programs. And for the umbrellas organizations of the academic cooperation, there is also the academic freedom. So it's a double layer of right of initiatives. And so they have developed program on a portfolio basis, combining various instruments from the very individual level with the scholarships, which can be very short, a few months to 1 or 2 years, depending the type of scholarships. At the level of the research projects, there are also some short-term research projects to longer term, and there is also a third important instrument, which is the institutional cooperation, and there is a very long-term cooperation. It's multi-disciplinarity cooperation, and as it already been said, it takes time. Cooperation takes time, and to have this long partnership, you have to invest a lot of energy and a lot of time. So the complementarity between the different types of support is crucial for us and for our model. Within these programs, the umbrella organizations organize calls for proposals for the various instruments, and their equitable partnerships and co-construction between researchers from partner countries and Belgian researchers are at the heart of the strategy of these programs. Particular attention is paid to the multidisciplinarity in the research programs, also giving place to humanities and social sciences. And another key issue is really the dissemination and the appropriation of the research results via different mechanisms, but which includes the partnerships between the partner university and the government bodies, the involvement of final beneficiaries and relevant local authorities. And what is also important is in the selection of the projects, it's made by committees of international scientific experts, but there is an important place for experts from African countries. So they assess the program, the projects who will be implemented by the both Belgian and partners. I just want, if I may, give one example of a part of the program. It's because I am the beneficiary of this part of the program. Is the policy support program implemented by both ARES and VLIR. And so the Belgian Cooperation Department benefits from the partnerships built between Belgian and African researchers who support us in the development of evidence-based cooperation policies, for the moment in 3 thematics: environment and climate change, fragility, and social protection. So we use to define our policies, we use the knowledge of our partners' universities in Africa. And I think it's a good way to see how the partnerships, the transformative partnerships, can also be useful for ourselves.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you very much. But how is it? How are the host countries, so to speak, the governments? How are they involved in this process of shaping projects?
Ourselves, you mean?
Yeah,
or
yourself, and
yes?
of course your counterparts in Africa.
In Africa, for this program in particular, so it's. We have launched ideas and requests to evidence-based evidence-based policies to be helped to do that. But it's not really a bilateral cooperation between Belgium and partners countries. It's really with universities and yes, research institutions. Yes, yes, yes.
Development. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. George, last but not least, sorry for that.
Yeah, thank you very much. A lot of appreciation for the organization, including me in this panel. Coming back to the question, I would like to approach this question from the institutional perspective. I wouldn't want to layer it from the international policy perspectives, which I have that challenge. Am I clear now?
Yeah.
I'll be a little loud, but don't say I'm rude, because if I talk gently, you will not get to hear what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is that I would like to layer it from the institutional level and how this affects the individual researchers within institution as an institution head, in order to ensure that there is effective participation. As a university, I'm talking about Gulu University, we have said it that all researches that are done must emphasize a particular research approach. And in most cases, we emphasize researches that have impact in the community, and that determine the principle within which we can collaborate with any partner or make application for any grants. And I'm happy that it's talking about right of initiatives, which we can, and then we can invite our northern partner. We do believe that with community-based participatory action research, the outcome of these research approaches would certainly be inclusive and not those kind of research that are extractive. So we still emphasize the issue of decolonization of research, and we believe community-based participatory action research approach is one of those which can help us to decolonize. We still emphasize what we call knowledge democracy. So in this research partnership, we would like it to be as inclusive as possible, not only for the global south, as we have been talking, but also for the excluded north. There are also excluded north, not pockets of the south. There could be northern people excluded, like in Canada, like in Australia. We have those communities. And we think, and we're working together with them to emphasize this perspective so that it can prioritize our perspective, prioritize our needs, prioritize the kind of data that we get from these research collaborations. So in that approach, we co-create, issues of equities are taken on board, and then ownership, shared decision-making, because it is a complete approach that brings you together. And mutual benefits that overcomes epistemic power imbalances. And of course, we are in a group of scholars that are advocating for epistemic justice and insisting that our government must put up policies for the recognitions of African perspective in science. Science is not neutral, because science is informed by perception and perspective of different people from different culture. And if we go with one evaluation and leave the other perspective, then that is an exclusionary science, and that is what we do not want. Let everybody bring their ideas on the table. Now, this then goes deeper, because we even struggled with our institutional ethical research boards, because they, in order to clear researchers, they borrow standards from the West.
Yeah.
And we struggle with them to include our researcher process, because this exclusion is not just north-south, but even within academy, social scientists and their approaches are also put at the sideline. And then those who are positivists, they are the scientists, because they are objective and their results can be counted. And they tend to have the upper hand in getting the funding. That is why you see medical faculties, scientific faculties dominate. While the social scientists, for us who are in social science, we tend not to dominate this, because when you go for the assessment, I think you bring those scientists, not social scientists, the physical and biological scientists, to evaluate these proposals. And in most cases, we miss out. And most of the research grants that we get, we have got to go up to the negotiating table with the donors and say, this is our perspective. That is when we can get it. I've had a lot of challenges with the Canadian Research Council. It's a bit of a problem. The South African Research Council, because we have had a lot of activities there, we can. So, and then it goes deeper. It means even within our National Research Council, we have got to insist on this perspective. So the policies need to be changed. We need a common regulatory frameworks that brings on board all dimensions of knowledge, all dimensions of methods of research, but not just emphasizing a particular perspective. So the ethical standard needs to be harmonized. The knowledge sharing elements also needs to be harmonized. And all these policies at national level, at regional level, at institutional level needs to be harmonized, so that researchers can then be transformative and promote equity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. So this concludes the first round of questions. I think for the second round, we'll need to watch more closely the time. I appreciate your contributions. They were very rich. George, you made my mind boiling, because I was wondering, how do you bring all of these different aspects under one head and still manage the whole process? That's sounds to me very complicated. But okay, fine. It's one way to take it. Maybe there are other ways. But as we spoke about the gap analysis, or the gaps that could be there, so the next question, or the second question, centers around the prospects for gap analysis of extant policy and regulatory architectures. So the point is, establishing transformative collaborations with Africa as a benchmark and standard practice within the scientific community will require adjustments in higher education sector policy and regulatory architectures to ensure that such a mode of partnership working is properly enabled and incentivized. A key step toward identifying where and how such adjustments need to be made is the conduct of careful gap analysis of relevant policies and guidelines of funders, higher education institutions, publishers, academic governance bodies against transformative collaboration principles. With respect to your own institutions or networks, what do you think are the prospects and opportunities for pursuing such a gap analysis? What challenges or barriers would be faced, and what kinds of support or input would be required? Yeah? It's not an easy subject, I'm sorry for that. George, you want to start this time, or, and if you can, 2 minutes?
I would have loved that we follow the same order, but nonetheless, I think that is exactly what I've just been saying. You identify what the problem is. In my institution, we say our researchers should not only contribute to publications. We emphasize that. We are an agriculturally inclined universities. I would want to see what the farmers are benefiting. And I am the guardian of that. All collaboration, memorandum of understanding and agreement are signed by me. And my legal department is to ensure that the principles which we uphold are adhered to. And if it is not visible, it should be negotiated before I sign. And we have so far succeeded in that. And then, of course, the one which I said, we noticed there is a gap. And in the ethical clearance, the kind of research that we do get rejected, it is not cleared to go forward.
Yeah.
And that has implication for also funding. So we have decided include all different disciplines and their approaches in the ethics committee.
Okay.
We are doing that in Gulu. We are a consortium that's doing that in Rhodes. Our members must be on the ethics committee to ensure that the approaches that we use get cleared. And through this, we would now want to ensure that the national ethical clearance can then benefit from the institutional ethics committee to reform their procedures and processes. And then it goes on into the international. So this, we believe, would help to cover that gap. Now, the challenge that we are not able to access is that of the funders, because the funding criteria is not open. There is what we call call. When you do what they call, we call it wild application. You just get a donor, and then you send your ideas. In most cases, success rate is 0. So you've got to wait when they do, just like was shown here, respond to calls. And those calls are already structured. There is expectation of what should be done. And we believe these calls also need to be negotiated, maybe through the charter. We can have that to engage with those call developers so that they develop calls which are a little more democratic and acceptable. So that still exists. There's a gap at that level. And once that is sorted, then it would be okay. Because even within the institution, you find there are certain lecturers who despise, and then there are certain ones who accept. But as far as publications are concerned, at least there are now journals that are a little democratic, even in the kind of ideas they receive, the kind of article they get, and they publish. Yeah. And some of it are even instituted by people who subscribe to diverse understanding of what kind of knowledge should be operating and what contributes. We believe that all understanding, all ways of knowing must contribute to solving world problems, not just from one perspective. So yes, we are dealing with that at the institutional level, we are dealing with those gaps at the national level, and we hope we will reach international level. Thank you.
Thank you. As a funder, I'm a little bit far from
Of course.
of this, but what I see when I talk to participants of a project, it's the lack of valorization of the activities which are not research and publication. In academic cooperation, you have to put a lot of time and energy in to build a partnership, to speak, to think to the uptake and the dissemination of the results. And you don't have so much time to publish, to make the research. It's true for the Belgian young researchers who hesitate to be involved in such a project because they see their career will the time go fast and they don't have time to make the research. And it's true also for African colleagues who have a big charge of course, and they don't have really time for the project. So how can we do? How can you do to promote and give a more valorization to these activities? And what I see also, a second thing is, as funder of a development cooperation department, we have to give funding, which is ODA, official development aid. It's not funding of research, so we have a development agenda. And we want that the project we are funding has usable results to have an impact on the population. But is it fair? I mean, it's a real question. Does this limit the academic freedom of African researchers? We note that even now, many funded projects are still linked to medical sciences, agronomy, veterinary sciences, but what place we give to, we've already said it, to sociology, linguistics, history, and so on. We only use these disciplines to provide support to the real scientific disciplines and to be sure that results are used by policy makers and by communities, but also in the development cooperation, academic development cooperation, we don't finance fundamental research. So it's also unfair for African universities and researchers who maybe want just to be a center of excellence in quantum physics, but it won't be funded by our budgets. And it's also a key issue for us now in the few years which are coming. It's the mobility. We see it's very difficult, and I am afraid more and more difficult for African researchers and scholars to be able to come in Europe to make a part of the academic career. So it's a huge challenge for us to continue to guarantee that this possibility for scholars and researchers to be able to come here.
Yes, I'll try to be brief. I completely agree. It was in my notes as well. The research assessments and the evaluation of research careers of researchers, they need to be revised. I mean, if we want these principles, if we want science as global public good to be promoted, it just cannot happen with the current structures. And it was said also by the colleague from Namibia. So no matter where you are in the world, you're not incentivized to collaborate, to promote multi-stakeholder collaboration, to talk to indigenous peoples, marginalized communities. You don't, if you don't publish in the end, if your university is not ranked based on the publications, it's never. So it's really an issue in general, and I'm happy to note that there are a lot of initiatives happening now going in the direction of changing this research assessment and evaluations of careers. For us, on open science is the same thing. It's a huge barrier, and we cannot move that much if the incentives are not put in place. And then the investments will come along as well, because again, the values are going to be placed in different places, and it's going to be valued differently, including also from the different donors. And another point I wanted to make also is there is a lack of a proper monitoring framework. We don't really know, at least not to my knowledge, what is the impact that we want to achieve and how do we measure that impact. Again, we have monitoring frameworks for science, technology, innovation from the past also as well. What exactly do we want to measure now? How do we want to have the impact? How do we evaluate the impact of these new different partnerships or collaborations? I think a new metrics and a new halfly quantitative, halfly qualitative, with inputs, of course, from colleagues from social sciences and natural sciences in the development of that monitoring framework is going to be very critical moving forward if we really want to make this transformation happen. And just very quickly, the third point, when it comes to international scientific collaborations, what we have seen in UNESCO in particular, they don't happen in a vacuum, right? They happen also as a reflection of the geopolitical situation, of the bilateral relations between the different countries. So a discussion on transformative scientific collaborations has to take place in the context of the discussions on science diplomacy and what the role of science diplomacy is, particularly now as we're kind of rethinking what science diplomacy means in the current times that we have. So these are just some of the few points where maybe there are gaps, and research communities are actually extremely important for us to try to fill those gaps moving forward.
That's a very good point. I think involving science diplomacy or using science diplomacy as a vehicle to transmit the messages and to try and convert more people to apply new principles and more modern approaches. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, some reflections building on what we have been hearing, because they are all very well-made points. I would like to say that this gaps analysis definitely should be done, but perhaps recognizing that we are not starting from zero. There are already gap analyses that have been made or that are being made, but also perhaps a review on how we approach the gaps analysis would be very good, because I would like to bring again here the concept of reciprocity. That should be the end goal, and then perform the gaps against a baseline of what that means. So having a good, broad but good definition of what is the end aim would be very good for these gaps, because you alluded to mobility gaps. Well, mobility gaps are sometimes really, in a way, the impediment is really, allow me that word, silly. It's like real difficulties of obtaining visas.
Yeah.
It can be as simple as that.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying about the importance of framing the gaps in an appropriate way, because some things can be just at the reach of a hand just by switching an agreement or something, well, there are more long-term policies that refer to the long-term funding. So there are many different levels where we can act, and perhaps starting by what is closer to us, it would be good. In terms of research assessment, thank you, Anna, for your words about that. Indeed, there are many initiatives. For example, something that in my view is not yet addressed enough is the recognition of indigenous knowledge. That is one factor, which could be quite easy if we have enough stakeholder buying in that we can propose that this is. So well, my idea here is that there are some not easy, but first immediate sections or factors considering the reciprocity that can be tackled. Because indeed, as you said, the concept is humongous and many things should be paid attention. But when you land in the reality, there are some things that can already be done. At the same time that thinking about the more difficult longer-term issues.
The low-hanging fruit, so to speak. All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you again. Talking from an institution point of view, we think it's in this gap analysis, it will be of great importance to actually talk to the practitioners, to the researchers that are on the ground. What kind of gaps are there? What is the obstacles for making this happen? And talk to the researchers that are experienced in working together across our two continents. And there are a lot of good examples of collaborations that have followed these kind of along these lines, and learning from them. I think also there is a lack of information. I think we talked about it earlier with the kind of getting from this strategy, getting from this kind of geopolitical intercontinental dialogue to actual actions that are close to the researchers. And that are accessible for the researchers on the ground. Because in my visits to different universities, we hear that, they hear about all these dialogues, they hear about this kind of good intentions and programs, but one vice chancellor I talked to said, well, we haven't seen any calls, we haven't seen any euros. So that to kind of get from kind of the good intentions, the good programs, and of course having a more co-creating process would also enhance this information flow, I think. A third point is that, of course, we need robust institutions on both sides that have the knowledge. And I mean on the administrative side, that can support these researchers, because I agree very much, the researchers are there to do research, and the universities should then support them in every other aspects. So learning from each other on kind of the administrative support for either research funding proposals, and also on post grant support when you are going to submit your reporting, your budgeting, your all the kind of post award administrative work. We need also to strengthen those at all universities, and I think that's something that we are looking into now, is to see the whole value chain from kind of the idea for a research proposal to all the way to the conclusion of a research proposal. How can we do this together, and how can we learn together how to do this better? And of course, this is kind of way down in the chain, moving from the kind of the EU, AU level, all the way down to the actual researchers that are working together. And I think there is a lot that we can learn, and I think we need a gap analysis on what are the structures there at institutions, and what is lacking of knowledge when it comes to this, to actually support our research in their endeavors. Thank you.
Now, University of Namibia.
So I try and take a sort of benefit from my colleagues that I'm speaking the last, so I'll take triple the time that they have taken. Anyway, let me conclude. I fully agree that there is a need for gap analysis against the principles of the Charter, but I also think against the layers of power that creates these dominances. And because if we do that, we will not just identify the challenges, but also the opportunities of what we can do. And I want to give you an example. If you take the framework of this scientific apartheid, what it basically means is that it normalizes the imbalances and the dominances, whether it is from the point of view of the epistemologies of what do we know and how do we know. And that changes into practice. If you take, for example, the conflicts in Africa, the approach that is used there is not the framework that the people in the villages use to solve problems, to manage conflicts. It's the approach of peacekeeping rather than peacemaking or conflict resolution. And this is coming from what we think about how do we know and what we know. The dominancy of language also comes in the form of you have to publish in this type of journals that are H-indexed like this if we are to fund you. Yeah? And what it does is it also disadvantages the local language because we're not publishing in that, and people then don't have access to this knowledge. And when they don't have access to knowledge, we are disempowering them. And so it's not just the dominance of the current languages, but it's also actually worsening the situation of, that's why some of these languages are dying, because they become irrelevant. And that is why in some of us, when we go to talk to the villages when we are conducting research, they will tell you, you people are always coming here asking us, we don't eat research, we are tired. And what they mean is they are not seeing the value of this knowledge. And it is in those imbalances and dominances that we must focus the reviews around the Charter principles and how this would inform new regulations and create more opportunities for us to, and I really also want to emphasize the importance of social sciences. Because the hard sciences, sometimes we use knowledge to cause problems, and social sciences come to clean. And we should use the social sciences to make sure that we prevent the mess that is caused by hard sciences.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. very good concluding remarks, so to speak. Are there any questions from the audience? Burning issues. In the back, please. Yeah, maybe.
Good morning to you all. Good day. Thierry Roland Tabi from the Okwelians think tank in Cameroon. I want to come back on UNESCO's presentation, Dr. Anna Pessik's brilliant presentation. I will try to be politically correct this time around, since yesterday was a bit... So the first question is, the UNESCO's framework on open science is signed by 194 countries. I want to know, is it state actors, researchers, or researchers that do politics part-time? Then the second question is, what are the epistemology models put in place for the success of that framework? For example, when you take into consideration the development of artificial intelligence, and you look at the disparity between norms and regulations in terms of open science and open data and so on, I want to understand what are the models that are put in place for the success of that framework since 2022. Then the question that is burning my lips, the last question is, are there sanctions for states that do not comply to this framework, or what are the measures that are put in place in case they don't comply? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll reply, and again, try to be brief. These are questions for another conference around the implementation of the recommendation. So the recommendation has been adopted by member states, by governments who are part of UNESCO, basically most of the governments in the world. But the development process included inputs from different researchers, librarians, indigenous peoples, because there is a whole chapter on indigenous knowledge, and a variety of other stakeholders. Then the member states took the draft text, negotiated amongst themselves, and then adopted unanimously in the end. It is a recommendation. It is not legally binding as a convention, so it's a recommendation. However, the countries who adopt it, they commit to implementing the actions that are in the recommendation and then report back to UNESCO every 4 years on the progress made. And to monitor the progress made, again, we worked through some working groups with different researchers and other stakeholders to create a survey that was just sent to member states a couple of months ago that they will need to respond to, hopefully through consultations, national consultations with the different actors, to tell us where they are with the policies, with infrastructures, with the collaborations, inclusion of indigenous knowledge, open access, open data, and other issues and actions that are mentioned in the recommendations. And no, there are no ways of, no kind of punishments for those countries or those actors who do not abide by what is in the recommendation.
Thank you. Any further questions? There's a gentleman in the back.
Yes, thank you very much. I think I really found the debate very interesting. I would just like to come back to 2 key issues that you mentioned at the end of the debate: the contribution of social sciences, but also the matter of language and language use in this context. To what extent is interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity really addressed in the Charter? What does it mean exactly for the Charter, if there is any need to foster interdisciplinarity between natural sciences and social sciences? And the issue of language is not only addressed to like scientific publication, but also to scientific accountability. You were saying that the contribution between natural sciences and social sciences. I had the experience that when I was on my field research, like in Mali, and the population was just telling me, so you are talking to us in a language that we understand. So this is not common. I said yes, because I speak the same language like you, I come from the same country like you. But when there are other peoples coming, they have translators who translate things, they take the data, they go, and they don't come back. We don't know what is happening. And there is no accountability. There is no longer contact with the populations. They know what happened. They don't know what happened. They really have no idea. And at that moment, I decided that I would just at least send back a book or any publication that I have that they could have for themselves. And whenever I can come and maybe talk to them. But my mentor does it in another way, because he speaks more than 3 African languages. He's Swiss. Professor Thomas Bayat, he just goes back to the village and talks to them in their language about the research and about the research outputs. Would be any way that the charter could consider that really accountability to the local population after a research project should be really considered. Thank you.
Right. I don't know whether any one of the panelists want to respond to that. Otherwise, I see somebody from the Bristol University who might be able to answer. I don't know.
That's a good point.
Okay, very good.
Maybe I can just comment on that. In the gap analysis, I think that should be taken into account, because sometimes the funding doesn't provide the provision to give feedback to the research participants. So that should be taken into account, and it should make provision also for translation of the material, the research findings, to the language that the people need, so they can use this knowledge.
Yes.
Otherwise, it is just something that we take from the people, and in some cases we even patent. I mean, the cases of Ohudia, Devil's Claw, all these that have been used by the San people have now been patented by pharmaceuticals, and the real knowledge holders are not benefiting anything. Yeah. So I think this is why I think in the gap analysis it's important that we identify what the policy opportunities that needs to be put in place would be, and the regulations around that, even in terms of the Nagoya Protocol, access benefit sharing, and all these other things.
Okay.
So I just would like to complete, please, also a provision to the people who are giving their knowledge. I mean, when I go there, I ask them, they give me knowledge, and what do I give them back? They give me their time, their resources, and their knowledge that I use. Maybe this could be also something to be considered.
Thank you. Can I proceed? I just
please,
respond by giving an example. There are these extractive researches which I think we want to discourage. Extractive. Go in, get your data, get out, and forget where you have come from. We are doing quite a lot of research on energy, and we do it in an interdisciplinary approach. We try to do one with the community, and you know biogas. We say you can use biogas. We can connect your toilets and then connect it to your kitchen, and you get gas. So where is the gas coming from? From shit. I'm not going to cook my food using that gas. They couldn't make sense that. So we say, okay, let us change it now. We use cow dung. Then that was acceptable. But the system is complex. So they are left with something to do. And then that is where the social thing, the attitude, the relationship between the community and those
researchers
refused.
Yeah.
And the researchers have good intention. And then another one also again, energy. Charcoal is being used, wood is being cut. So we said, now we are going to use your farm waste. So we built up, we fabricated the machinery for those, and then we placed it in the community. So they collect all their farm refuse, we transport them into where the machinery is built. We train them how to make those charcoal, we call it green charcoal.
Yeah.
And then the technology is picking up. Now we expect fabricators to start fabricating that and go on with it. So, and what do the scholars get? They still get their publications. And they get their innovations, which they can sell.
Yeah.
And the community still get their energy, plus a source of income from the charcoal they're making, from not trees, but farm refuse. So these traditional extractive researches is what we need to discourage. And science does that a lot. That is why we say action research, which is not admired among scientists, that leave some products with the community and it changes ways of life. And then the charcoal stove, the one that uses less fuel, you design it with them and what is appropriate, and they accept, and it changes the practice of cooking within the community. You get your article as a researcher, you get your promotion, and then it is sent to the journal. Everybody benefits.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I think that is what the charter needs to encourage, interdisciplinarity, as well as product producing. There is my colleague there from RUFORUM who wants to say something.
Thank you. My name is Patrick Okori. I lead RUFORUM. I think part of the challenge is that the way we conduct our researches as academic institutions is more problem-centered rather than mission-centered. And that means that we tend to have, we rarely have programs as such, but when you go to a university and say, what research do you do? They give you a long list of what students are doing. But what are those students trying to solve in society? And that means a shift away from trying to find a problem. It's about curiosity. Students doing PhDs, and most of our work is curiosity-based. So, and that's where this issue that he's talking about comes in. Fine, you could be doing some curiosity stuff, which is good for a PhD, good for a postdoc, but that should be embedded in something higher that the professor, the chair, is trying to address. And that must be embedded further into the policy of the organization, that you must give back to the community. You should want them to know why that leaf turns green or whatever color, and how that feeds into their well-being and so on. So if that is discussed in that framework and operates in that framework, then we start shifting away more towards a 21st century university that is focusing on turning science into products, services, wealth in a much more sustainable and integrated manner. So I'm saying it's much more complex than that, but it means changing and rethinking how we set ourselves as academic organizations. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, George. And that is, in principle, a good end, I think, if you allow me to say. Probably you're all hungry, like me. That's a good end for the panel. I thank you very much for being, for attending. And a round of applause for the panelists. And thank you very much for your attendance also here. I hope it was useful.
Ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I think everybody is hungry. But I thought since this will be the last few minutes or the last half hour or so that we have together after 1.5 days of rich discussions, I spared you my summary yesterday evening, but today I cannot spare you a very, very quick summary. And what I would like to do is to just capture the 4 main strands of thinking that have emerged over the extremely rich and engaged discussions that we had yesterday and today. But then also importantly, to give you a sense of where we think we can take this conversation further, the conversation we started today. So there, I said there were four main strands that I think are worth highlighting as we leave to go to our other business. The first was, I think, a very clear sense, a very clear and shared sense among us all that the deeper transformation in research collaborations that the Charter, the Africa Charter, calls for is relevant, and we need to take it seriously in thinking about the future of shaping the collaborations that we forge between Europe and African actors and the policies around that. So I think there was a shared agreement that we need to take the principles of the Africa Charter seriously. Second, I think we all, especially yesterday's discussion, highlighted the appetite for reflecting critically and reviewing our existing collaborative practice against the principles of the Charter, to identify where we're already doing very good work, where promising approaches exist, but also where the gaps are that we need to address. And we highlighted not only the appetite for doing that, but also the promise, because in the 2 sessions that we had, we already identified so many promising models and approaches that we could build on going forward. So that was the second. The third we have talked about today is not only the importance of the policy and regulatory architectures and the funding regimes and instruments that exist, because they constitute the rules of the game, and we need to review them critically in light of Africa Charter principles, but doing so with care and with greater consideration to the benchmarks and the ultimate outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And lastly, but not least, we had a number of very important critical engagements with the arguments of the Charter, the language used, the conceptualizations used. And I think this is very important. There is need for further intellectual, scholarly debate around the arguments and the analyses that underpin the Charter. And it underlines the fact that we've always understood the Charter as a living document. It is the start of a conversation, of deeper thinking, of deeper reflection, of further inquiry. And I think that too came out in our discussions today, as well as yesterday. We discussed this, but we also highlighted across the piece the importance of moving towards action. And I think we agreed that what we need to envisage going forward is I think I'm using your words, Amanda, a mosaic of different action and activities emerging in different spaces. Each of us in our own institutions, in our own spaces, with our own spheres of influence, taking forward the kinds of work, the reflection on practice, the review of policy, the further intellectual debate that we can, and doing so strategically and forming bonds strategically as well as in friendship. We I speak now on behalf of UCT, UNISA, and the University of Bristol as the 3 core institutions facilitating the Africa Charter going forward, want to make sure that this mosaic of activity that we envisage becomes a joint journey. That we move from what we have at the moment is a community of interest to a genuine community of action around the shared values and the principles that the Charter espouses. So what we're going to do in the next few months is we are going to be launching a website, a dedicated website for the Africa Charter, as well as a set of very clear roadmaps for those who sign the Charter in terms of the steps of activities that they can take. Those steps are the ones that we've discussed: reviewing practice and policy, stimulating further debate. We will also be providing tools, this also came up, that you or others can use to support your reflective processes, to support your review processes. So all of this will be launched early in the new year. And the platform that the website will represent will also enable us to stay in touch, to make sure that we exchange the experiences that we make, the insights that we gather, the further questions that we raise through our joint activities, individually or collectively. So, this will be a space for us to continue the conversation that we started today. In the meantime, because that's early in 25, in the meantime, we will capture all of the substantive points or the major substantive points that were raised, that were discussed, that were agreed upon or not agreed upon in the last 1.5 days. We will capture that in a concise report, which we will share with all of you. And if you want to stay in touch, if you want to start or continue talking, continue discussing or raising further queries with us, in the meantime, please use the email address that we will be using to communicate with you, to share the report with you, as well as all the presentations that were shown. So I know what it's like. One goes from one forum to the next with very good intentions of keeping up the conversations, and then other things come in the way. But I think this is the start of something very important in the European space. Let's make sure we jointly carry it forward and stay engaged together in the spirit of the Charter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isabella. As one of the organizers of this event, the Coimbra Group, I just want to take 1 or 2 minutes before you get your lunch. The Coimbra Group has been involved in planning this event. We want to continue to be involved, and that will be through the working group Global Partnerships. We have our next meeting in a few weeks' time. We are going to use the Global Partnerships Working Group as a vehicle to get out information about the Charter and to engage the Coimbra Group member universities to sign it and support it. So, yeah, with those few words, I want to commit the Global Partnerships Working Group in the Coimbra Group to continue to work on supporting the Charter. Thank you.
Let me announce on behalf of the 3 co-organizers that the lunch is open. So thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of you.